You will fulfill your duty, nothing more. Those were the words Adrian Thornfell spoke to his bride on their wedding night. Not a vow, but a sentence. Elara Vance had walked into marriage expecting coldness, perhaps even indifference. What she found was worse, a man who had already decided she was nothing, a womb with a title, a placeholder in his bloodline. But Adrian Thornfell made one fatal mistake that night. He underestimated her. This is the story of a woman who turned a loveless cage into a kingdom, who took a duke's cruelty and forged it into her own weapon. A story of power stolen in silence, respect earned in defiance, and a marriage that became a war neither of them expected to survive. If you want to see how far this story reaches, drop a comment with the city you're watching from. Hit that like button. And stay until the end, because what Elara does next will change everything. The wedding had been beautiful. That was the worst part. Elara stood in the center of the bridal suite, still wearing the gown that had taken 3 seamstresses 2 months to complete. Ivory silk, seed pearls along the bodice, a train that had whispered across marble floors like a promise. Everyone had said she looked like something out of a painting. She felt like a lamb dressed for slaughter. The door opened. Adrian Thornfell entered without knocking, because why would he? This was his house, his estate, his duchy, his room, technically, though he'd made it clear weeks ago that they would maintain separate chambers. Appearances, he'd said. Efficiency. He closed the door behind him with a soft click that somehow felt louder than a slam. Elara turned to face him. He was handsome. She'd give him that much. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of sharp features that looked carved rather than born. Dark hair, darker eyes, and a jaw that could cut glass. Women at the reception had watched him with hunger barely disguised as propriety. Men had watched him with envy wrapped in respect. Elara watched him and saw exactly what he was, a fortress with no door. "You look tired," he said, not unkindly, just observed, like commenting on the weather. "It's been a long day." "It has." He moved to the sideboard, poured himself a measure of whiskey, didn't offer her one. "I'll make this brief." Her stomach tightened. "All right." Adrian took a drink, then turned to face her fully. His expression was the same one she'd seen him use with his steward, his solicitor, his stablemaster, professional, detached, thorough. "I want to be clear about expectations," he said. "I don't believe in romantic delusions or false promises. This marriage serves a purpose. You understand that?" "I do." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Good." Another sip. "Your primary responsibility is to provide an heir. Preferably 2. An heir and a spare, as they say. Beyond that, you'll manage the household staff, attend necessary social functions, and maintain the reputation of this family. Nothing scandalous, nothing embarrassing." Elara felt something cold unfurl in her chest. "I see. I'll be respectful of your privacy. We'll share a bed when necessary for conception, but otherwise I won't impose on your time or your space. You'll have your own chambers, your own staff, your own allowances. I'm not unreasonable." How generous. If he caught the edge in her tone, he didn't show it. "I don't expect affection. I don't require companionship. I won't pretend this is anything other than what it is, a practical arrangement between 2 people whose families saw mutual benefit. And what do you see?" The question came out before she could stop it. Adrian looked at her then, really looked, and for a moment something flickered behind those dark eyes. Something almost human. Then it was gone. "I see a woman who understood the terms before she signed the contract," he said. "I see someone intelligent enough not to expect fairy tales." "No," Elara said quietly. "You see a womb with a dowry." Silence dropped between them like a stone into deep water. Adrian's jaw tightened. "That's crude." "That's honest." She lifted her chin. "You want honesty, don't you? Clarity? No romantic delusions?" "I want—" He stopped, started again. "I want us to understand each other." "Oh, I understand perfectly, Your Grace." She made his title sound like a barrier. "You've made yourself extraordinarily clear." He studied her for a long moment. Then he set down his glass with deliberate care. "I'll leave you to rest. We can discuss household arrangements in the morning." "Of course." He moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. "Elara." It was the first time he'd used her name since the ceremony. She hated how it sounded in his voice, like something he'd memorized but never meant. "Yes? This doesn't have to be unpleasant." If we're both realistic about what this is, it can be tolerable. Tolerable. Good night, Adrian. He left. The door closed, and Elara stood in the center of that beautiful room in her beautiful dress and felt the full weight of her beautiful mistake settle onto her shoulders. She'd known, of course. Going in, she'd known. Her father had been honest, brutally so, about why Duke Adrian Thornfell had finally chosen to marry after 33 years of steadfast bachelorhood. The Thornfell line needed securing. Adrian needed an heir. Elara's family needed the alliance, the title, the financial relief that came with marrying into one of the oldest duchies in the realm. He's not a bad man, her father had said. Cold, maybe, practical, but not cruel. You could do worse. She hadn't asked if she could do better. The answer was obvious, no. Not with her family's debts, not with her lack of prospects, not with her 26 years weighing against her in a society that considered women over 25 practically withered. Adrian Thornfell was her best option, her only option, and he'd just made it clear that he saw her as a transaction with legs. Elara walked to the window and looked out over the estate. Her estate now, technically, though Adrian's words had made it clear exactly how much ownership she actually held. The grounds stretched into darkness, vast and imposing. Gardens she hadn't seen yet, stables, a forest at the border, tenant farms beyond that. Thornfell Manor, her home, her prison. No, she said aloud to the empty room. Her reflection in the window glass looked back at her, pale and furious and dressed like someone else's fantasy. No, that's not how this works. Because here was the thing Adrian Thornfell didn't understand for all his intelligence and calculation. Elara Vance hadn't survived 26 years of disappointment, manipulation, and diminishing options by being passive. She'd survived by being smart, by watching, by learning how power actually worked, not how people pretended it worked. Her father had taught her that, at least. Not intentionally. He'd been too busy teaching her brothers about estate management and investments, but she'd learned anyway. Sitting quiet in the corner during business meetings, listening at doors she wasn't supposed to be near, reading the ledgers her father left lying around because he'd never considered his daughter might understand them. She understood. She understood that power wasn't just about who held the title. It was about who held the loyalty, the trust, the daily machinery that kept everything running. Adrian Thornfell had the title, but Elara was going to have everything else. She turned away from the window and began unbuttoning the dress, each pearl button a small act of defiance. By the time she'd unlaced herself free, no lady's maid yet, Adrian hadn't mentioned staff for her, naturally. She'd made 3 decisions. First, she would fulfill the terms of this arrangement. She'd been bought, essentially, and she wouldn't pretend otherwise. But she'd extract every possible advantage from the position. Second, she would build her own power base within this estate, starting with the people Adrian clearly took for granted, the servants, the tenants, the people who actually made Thornfell function. Third, she would never, ever let Adrian Thornfell see her cry. Elara hung the wedding dress in the wardrobe. It would probably never be worn again, just preserved like a relic of someone else's happiness, and pulled on her nightgown. Plain cotton, practical. Nothing like the ridiculous confection with lace and ribbons that had been laid out on the bed, presumably by some well-meaning servant who thought tonight might be romantic. She climbed into bed alone and blew out the lamp. In the darkness, she allowed herself exactly 5 minutes of grief. For the marriage she'd never have. For the partnership she'd foolishly hoped might develop despite everything. For the small, stupid part of her that had looked at Adrian Thornfell's handsome face and cold eyes and wondered if maybe, just maybe, there was something underneath worth knowing. 5 minutes. Then she was done. Tomorrow, she'd begin. Morning came with a knock on the door at 7 sharp. Elara had been awake for an hour, having slept poorly in the unfamiliar bed with her mind churning over strategies and possibilities. "Come in," she called. A young woman entered carrying a breakfast tray. Early 20s, pretty in a nervous sort of way, with her dark hair pinned severely back and her uniform immaculate. She bobbed a curtsy that nearly sent the tray tilting. "Good morning, Your Grace. I'm Mary. I've been assigned as your lady's maid, if that suits you." Elara sat up, pulling her braid over one shoulder. "Good morning, Mary. Did the Duke assign you?" No, ma'am, Mrs. Hallowell did. She's the housekeeper. The Duke doesn't usually, that is, he leaves household staffing to Mrs. Hallowell. Interesting. I see. How long have you worked at Thornfell, Mary? 3 years, ma'am. Mary set the tray on the bedside table with visible relief at not having dropped it. I was a parlor maid before, but Mrs. Hallowell thought I might do well with additional responsibility, and when the Duke said he was marrying, she put me forward for training. That was kind of her, and kind of you, to take on the extra work. Elara gestured to the chair near the window. Sit with me while I eat, would you? Tell me about the household. Mary's eyes widened. Sit, ma'am? I couldn't. You can if I ask you to. Please, Mary, I'd like to understand how things work here. The girl sat, perched on the edge of the chair like a bird ready to flee. But she talked, and Elara listened. By the time she'd finished breakfast, toast, eggs, tea that was actually quite good, she'd learned that Thornfell employed 37 staff members between house and grounds, that Mrs. Hallowell had been housekeeper for 12 years and ran things with competence bordering on tyranny, that the steward, Mr. Garrett, handled the estate's business affairs and rarely communicated with anyone below his perceived station, that Adrian took most of his meals in his study or while working, almost never in the dining room, that the servants thought him fair but distant, more likely to forget their names than remember their birthdays, that nobody knew quite what to make of the new Duchess. They're worried, Mary admitted, growing braver as Elara showed genuine interest. Not about you specifically, ma'am, just change. The Duke's been on his own for so long, people get used to routines. I imagine they do. Elara set down her teacup. Mary, I want you to know something. I have no intention of disrupting routines that work, but I do intend to learn everything about how this household operates. Not to criticize, but to understand. Will you help me with that? Of course, ma'am, whatever you need. Good. Then let's start with introductions. I'd like to meet Mrs. Hallowell this morning, and Mr. Garrett if he's available. After that, perhaps you could show me the house. I've only seen the public rooms. Mary brightened. I'd be happy to, Your Grace. Thornfell is beautiful once you know your way around. Easy to get lost at first, though. The east wing alone has 23 rooms, and half of them look identical until you learn the portraits. 23 rooms in one wing. Elara tried not to think about the echoing emptiness of it all. Then I'd better have a good guide. She dressed simply, a morning dress in deep blue, practical and well-made, but nothing ostentatious. No jewelry except her wedding ring, which felt heavy and foreign on her hand. Mary helped with her hair, pinning it up in a style that was elegant without being fussy. You have lovely hair, ma'am, Mary said shyly, like honey in sunlight. Thank you. Elara met the girl's eyes in the mirror. You're kind to say so. It's only the truth. They found Mrs. Hallowell in her office, a small, neat room off the kitchen that smelled of lavender and account books. The housekeeper was exactly what Elara had expected, a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair, sharp eyes, and the bearing of someone who'd spent decades managing chaos into order. She stood when Elara entered and offered a curtsy that was respectful without being servile. Your Grace, welcome to Thornfell. Thank you, Mrs. Hallowell. I hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all. I've been expecting you. The housekeeper gestured to a chair. Please sit. Mary, fetch tea, would you? Once they were alone, Mrs. Hallowell folded her hands and studied Elara with the assessment of someone who'd seen many duchesses come and go. Except, Elara reminded herself, there hadn't been a duchess at Thornfell in over a decade. Adrian's mother had died when he was 20. The estate had been womanless at the top ever since. I imagine you have questions, Mrs. Hallowell said. Many. But first, I want to thank you for assigning Mary to me. She's been very helpful. Something flickered across the housekeeper's face. Surprise, maybe, or approval. Mary's a good girl, quick to learn. I thought you'd prefer someone eager rather than set in old ways. You thought correctly. Elara leaned forward slightly. Mrs. Hallowell, I'll be direct. I'm new here. I don't know the routines, the staff, or even the layout of the house. The Duke has made it clear that household management falls to me, but I can't manage what I don't understand. I need your help. Mrs. Hallowell's expression softened a fraction. You're honest. I appreciate that. I don't see the point in pretending I know what I'm doing when I don't, but I learn quickly, and I work hard. If you're willing to teach me how Thornfell operates, I promise I won't waste your time or undermine your authority. And if I'm not willing? Elara met her gaze steadily. Then I'll figure it out on my own, and it'll be messier and more disruptive for everyone. I'd rather avoid that. For a long moment, the housekeeper said nothing. Then slowly, she smiled. It transformed her face from stern to almost warm. You'll do, she said simply. Ask your questions, Your Grace. I'll answer what I can. They talked for 2 hours. By the time Mary returned with fresh tea, the first pot had gone cold, Elara had a notebook filled with information. Staff schedules, budget allocations, supply chains, maintenance issues. The complicated dance of managing an estate this size, with all its moving parts and competing needs. She also learned things Mrs. Hallowell didn't say outright, but implied with careful pauses and diplomatic phrasings. That the Duke's distance wasn't new, he'd always been remote, even before whatever had happened to make him worse. That some areas of the estate were neglected not from malice, but from sheer absence of attention. That morale among the staff was decent, but could be better. That nobody had asked Mrs. Hallowell's opinion on anything in years. The Duke trusts you, Elara said. That's clear. The Duke tolerates competence, Mrs. Hallowell corrected gently. It's not quite the same thing. No, I suppose it's not. When Elara finally left the housekeeper's office, it was nearly noon. Mary was waiting in the hallway, ready to continue the tour. Mrs. Hallowell likes you, the girl whispered as they walked. I can tell. She doesn't smile like that for just anyone. I like her too. She's formidable. She says the same about you, ma'am. I heard her tell Cook this morning that you had spine. That's high praise from Mrs. Hallowell. Elara felt absurdly pleased by this. Then I'd better live up to it. The tour took the rest of the afternoon. Mary hadn't been exaggerating. The manor was enormous. Drawing rooms and sitting rooms and parlors that all looked vaguely similar. A library that made Elara's heart ache with want. 3 stories of books, floor-to-ceiling shelves, reading nooks with windows overlooking the gardens. A portrait gallery filled with stern-faced Thornfells dating back 200 years. A music room with a pianoforte that Mary said no one had played in years. The late Duchess used to play, Mary explained. The Duke's mother. After she died, the Duke shut this wing up for a long time. Only reopened it a few years ago, and only because Mrs. Hallowell insisted the dust would ruin everything. Elara ran her fingers over the pianoforte's keys. They were badly out of tune. Did you know her, the late Duchess? No, ma'am. She died before I came. But the older staff speak of her fondly. They say she was warm, kind. Nothing like... Mary stopped abruptly, color flooding her cheeks. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have... It's all right. Elara moved away from the instrument. Nothing like the Duke. You can say it. I've noticed. He wasn't always so cold, they say. When he was younger, before his mother died, he was different. But grief changes people. So does betrayal. Mary blinked. Ma'am? Elara realized she'd said too much. Nothing. Just something I overheard. Tell me about the gardens. Can we see them from here? They could. The windows overlooked formal gardens that were immaculately maintained despite being almost entirely unused. Beyond them, she could see the edges of the forest, dark and dense. Does anyone walk there? Elara asked. In the gardens? The Duke rides through sometimes. Early morning, usually, before anyone else is about. But walking? No, ma'am. I don't think I've ever seen him just walk. A man who moved through his own estate like a ghost. Who ate alone, worked alone, existed alone in the middle of all this space and beauty and potential. What a waste, Elara thought. What a terrible waste. They finished the tour as the sun was setting. Mary brought Elara back to her chambers. She'd learned the way, mostly, but the corridors still felt labyrinthine and helped her change for dinner. Will you be dining with the Duke tonight, ma'am? I don't know. Has he asked for me? Mr. Garrett mentioned the Duke is expecting you in the small dining room at 7. Elara checked the clock. 20 minutes. Then I'd better not be late. She found the small dining room still large enough to seat 12 comfortably, with only one wrong turn. Adrian was already there, standing by the window with a glass of wine. He turned when she entered. Elara, good evening. Your Grace. His mouth twitched. Adrian, please. We're married. Formality seems excessive. Very well, Adrian. It still felt strange in her mouth. How was your day? Productive. Garrett and I reviewed the tenant contracts. Some need renegotiating before next quarter. He gestured to the table. Shall we? They sat. Dinner arrived in courses that were beautifully prepared and entirely wasted on the strained silence between them. Elara tried to make conversation, commenting on the food, asking about his work, mentioning her tour of the house. But every topic died after a few exchanges. Adrian wasn't rude exactly. He answered her questions. He listened when she spoke. But there was no warmth in it, no genuine engagement. He was going through motions, fulfilling an obligation, tolerating her presence. By the time dessert arrived, a chocolate torte that probably tasted wonderful, Elara was furious. Why did you marry me? The question came out sharper than she'd intended. Adrian looked up from his plate. I beg your pardon? Why did you marry me? Specifically me. Out of all the possible candidates your family undoubtedly paraded in front of you. I told you last night I needed an heir, yes, but you could have gotten that from any number of women. Why me? He set down his fork with careful precision. Why does it matter? Because I'd like to know if there was anything beyond convenience, beyond my father's debts and your need for a womb. Was there anything about me that factored into your decision? Adrian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measured. Your father said you were intelligent, practical. He said you understood your situation and wouldn't expect things I couldn't provide. That seemed compatible with my requirements. Compatible with your requirements, Elara repeated. Like selecting a horse, good bloodline, sound temperament, likely to breed well. That's exactly what you're describing, Adrian. She stood, her napkin falling to the floor. I'm going to retire. Thank you for dinner. Elara. Good night. She left before he could respond, before she could say something she'd regret, before the fury building in her chest turned into something else, something weaker. Back in her room, Mary was waiting to help her undress. The girl took one look at Elara's face and wisely said nothing, just efficiently unlaced and unbuttoned and brushed out her hair. Will there be anything else, ma'am? No, Mary. Thank you. Get some rest. You too, ma'am. Things always look different in the morning. Elara didn't believe that, but she appreciated the sentiment. Good night. Alone again, she moved to the writing desk and pulled out paper and ink. She'd start a list. Everything she'd learned today. Everything she needed to learn tomorrow. The weak points in the estate management, the opportunities. She wrote for an hour, until her hand cramped and her eyes blurred. When she finally climbed into bed, she didn't allow herself the grief this time. Grief was a luxury. Grief was permission to feel sorry for herself. Instead, she lay in the darkness and planned. Adrian Thornfell thought he'd married a convenient solution to his bloodline problem. He thought he'd secured an heir while maintaining his emotional distance and iron control. What he'd actually done was bring someone into his fortress who had nothing to lose and everything to prove. Someone who was done being underestimated. Someone who was going to take everything he'd dismissed, the household, the staff, the estate he barely noticed, and turn it into power he couldn't ignore. Elara smiled into the darkness. Let him have his title and his cold superiority. She was going to have Thornfell. The next morning, Elara woke with purpose crystallized into a plan. She would start with the servants. Not the senior staff, Mrs. Hallowell and Mr. Garrett had their own established hierarchies and loyalties, but the people below them, the parlor maids and footmen and kitchen workers who kept Thornfell running but remained invisible to someone like Adrian. People who were used to being overlooked. People who would remember someone who actually saw them. Over the next week, she made it her business to learn every staff member's name. Not just the ones who served her directly, but all of them. The scullery maid who worked before dawn. The stable boys. The groundskeeper's apprentices. She walked the estate daily, asking questions, listening to answers. She discovered that the roof over the servants' quarters leaked, that the kitchen gardens could produce more if they had better tools, that the laundry had been requesting updates to their equipment for 2 years with no response. She took notes. She also observed Adrian's patterns. He worked constantly, buried in ledgers and correspondence. He rode out to inspect the farms twice a week, spoke with his steward daily, reviewed contracts and accounts with meticulous attention. But he never connected the numbers to the people behind them. The tenants were names on leases. The servants were functions, not individuals. He He saw the machinery of the estate, but not the humans that made it work. That was going to be her advantage. 2 weeks after the wedding, Elara requested a meeting with Mr. Garrett. The steward received her in his office with barely concealed skepticism. He was a thin man in his 50s with the pinched expression of someone who'd spent his life dealing with numbers and found them more reliable than people. "Your Grace, how may I assist you?" Elara sat without being invited. "I've been reviewing the household accounts." His eyebrows rose. "I wasn't aware the Duke had given you access to—" "He hasn't. Mrs. Hallowell provided copies of the domestic expenditure records, which, as Duchess, I'm entitled to review. Unless you disagree?" Garrett's jaw tightened. "Of course not, though I handle all financial matters for the estate. If you have concerns, I'd be happy to address them." "I do have concerns, actually." She pulled out her notebook. "The servants' quarters need repairs. The kitchen requires updated equipment. The laundry is operating at half efficiency due to outdated machinery. These aren't luxuries. They're investments in operational capacity. The Duke sets budget priorities. Has the Duke been made aware of these issues?" Silence. "I thought not," Elara said calmly. "Mr. Garrett, I'm not here to undermine you, but I am here to ensure the household runs properly. These repairs and upgrades will cost money now and save money later through improved efficiency and staff retention. I'd like you to prepare a proposal for the Duke's review." "The Duke doesn't concern himself with domestic minutiae. Then perhaps he should, or perhaps, as his wife and the person responsible for household management, I should present it to him myself. Which would you prefer?" Garrett studied her with new wariness. "I'll prepare the proposal." "Excellent. I'd like to review it before it goes to the Duke, just to ensure we're aligned on priorities." "Of course, Your Grace." She left his office satisfied. Not a victory exactly, but progress. Garrett wouldn't be an ally. His loyalty was to Adrian and the established order, but he could be managed. The proposal appeared on her desk 3 days later. Elara reviewed it carefully, added her own notes on priority sequencing and expected returns, and brought it to Adrian herself. She found him in the library, his preferred working space apparently, surrounded by centuries of Thornfell knowledge he probably never questioned. "I need 10 minutes of your time," she said without preamble. Adrian looked up from his papers. "I'm rather busy." 10 minutes. Unless you'd prefer the servants' quarters to collapse and create a much larger problem." That got his attention. "What?" She laid out the proposal. The needed repairs, the equipment upgrades, the costs and projected savings. She'd marshaled her arguments carefully, framing everything in terms of efficiency and return on investment. He read in silence, then looked up at her. "This is Garrett's work?" Garrett prepared the financial details. I identified the priorities and structured the proposal. "You've been here less than a month, and I've used that time to understand how the household operates, which is my responsibility as I understand it." Adrian's expression was unreadable. "These are all approved. Tell Garrett to proceed." "Just like that?" "The analysis is sound. The expenditures are reasonable. Why would I object?" He paused. "Unless you expected me to." "I expected resistance, at least. Questions. Skepticism about my judgment." "Your judgment appears solid." He returned to his papers, dismissal implicit. "Was there anything else?" There was so much else. Questions she wanted to ask, walls she wanted to tear down, the crushing distance between them that made every interaction feel like negotiating a business contract. But she said, "No, thank you," and left. Small victories, she reminded herself. Small victories that would accumulate into something larger. She just had to be patient. The repairs began the following week. Elara made a point of being visible during the work, checking progress, thanking workers, ensuring quality. The servants noticed. Of course they did. "You didn't have to do this," Mrs. Hallowell said one afternoon, finding Elara inspecting the new laundry equipment. "The Duke would have approved eventually." "Eventually isn't good enough. People were working in unsafe conditions. Most employers wouldn't care." "I'm not most employers." Elara met the housekeeper's eyes. "I understand what it's like to be overlooked, to have needs dismissed as unimportant. I won't do that to the people who keep this house running." Mrs. Hallowell smiled. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone ornamental, decorative, content to be the Duke's pretty wife and produce his heirs without causing ripples. I'm sorry to disappoint. You haven't disappointed, Your Grace. Quite the opposite. Word spread. It always did in a household this size. The new Duchess cared about the servants. She learned their names. She fixed their problems. She actually listened. Loyalty, Elara was learning, didn't come from authority. It came from attention. From making people feel seen. Adrian had authority, position, power. But Elara was building something he'd never bothered to create: connection. By the end of her first month at Thornfell, she'd established routines: morning meetings with Mrs. Hallowell to review household matters, weekly reviews of domestic accounts, regular walks through the estate to stay visible and accessible. She'd started taking tea with small groups of servants in rotation, scandalous, probably, by society standards, but effective for understanding the real pulse of the place. She'd also started spending time in the library, not when Adrian was there. She'd learned his schedule, knew when the space would be empty. She wasn't ready yet for those uncomfortable silences while they shared the same air without sharing anything else. But alone, in the quiet, she devoured books on estate management, agriculture, economics. Everything she'd been denied as a woman, deemed unsuitable for her education. Everything she needed to understand to truly comprehend how Thornfell worked beyond just the household. She was reading about crop rotation patterns when she heard footsteps. Adrian stopped in the doorway, clearly surprised to find her there. "I didn't realize you used the library," he said. "I didn't realize I needed permission." "You don't. I just haven't seen you here before." "I come when you're not." She turned a page deliberately. "It's easier that way." He was quiet for a moment. "I see. Do you need the space? I can leave." "No, stay." He moved to his usual chair, gathered his papers. "I'll work elsewhere tonight." "Adrian?" But he was already leaving, taking his work and his cold distance with him. Elara stared at the empty doorway and felt something crack in her chest. Not heartbreak. You couldn't break what had never formed, but something close to it. Disappointment, maybe, or exhaustion. She was so tired of this. The careful distance, the polite strangers sharing a house, and a name, but nothing else. The way he looked at her like she was a puzzle he'd already solved and found uninteresting. But she couldn't afford to be tired. She had work to do. She returned to her book and planned her next move. 3 months into her marriage, Elara made her first real enemy. His name was Lucien Thornfell, Adrian's cousin and the only other male heir in the direct line. She'd heard about him before she'd met him. Mrs. Hallowell had mentioned him in passing, her tone careful in that way people used when discussing someone dangerous who couldn't be directly criticized. "He visits quarterly," the housekeeper had said. "Stays a week, sometimes 2. The Duke tolerates him because he must. Family obligation." "They're not close?" "They were once, before—" Mrs. Hallowell had trailed off, then changed the subject entirely. Elara had filed the information away and thought nothing more of it until the morning Lucien's carriage rolled up the drive unannounced. She was in the garden when he arrived, supervising the installation of new trellises for the climbing roses that had been strangled by years of neglect. Mary had run to fetch her, breathless and wide-eyed. "Your Grace, there's a gentleman here. Says he's the Duke's cousin. Mr. Garrett is receiving him, but I thought you should know." "Thank you, Mary." Elara brushed dirt from her hands. She'd stopped wearing gloves for garden work weeks ago, to the horror of propriety and the delight of the groundskeeper, who'd warmed to her immediately after she'd correctly identified a blight on the rose bushes. "I'll go in." She found them in the drawing room, Adrian standing by the fireplace with his usual rigid posture, and a man who could only be Lucien sprawled in the best chair like he owned it. The family resemblance was there, but warped. Where Adrian's features were sharp and controlled, Lucien's were sharp and cruel. Same dark hair, same strong jawline, but everything about him felt performative. The carefully tousled hair, the expensive but slightly too fashionable clothes, the smile that never reached his eyes. He stood when she entered, all exaggerated courtesy. "Ah, you must be the famous bride, Lucien Thornfell, at your service." He took her hand and kissed it before she could withdraw. "Adrian, you sly dog. You didn't mention she was beautiful." "Lucien." Adrian's voice was flat. "You didn't send word you were coming. Family doesn't need announcements, surely." Lucian released Elara's hand with obvious reluctance. Besides, I had to meet the woman who finally dragged you to the altar. 3 years I've been telling you to marry, and suddenly here we are. One has to wonder what finally changed your mind. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Duty, Adrian said simply, as I've explained before. Ah yes, duty. That convenient excuse for everything. Lucien's gaze slid back to Elara with calculation that made her skin crawl. Tell me, Your Grace, are you settling in well? Finding Thornfell to your liking? I am, thank you. Excellent, excellent. And the household? No complaints about the staff, I hope. Adrian runs rather a tight ship, some might say too tight. The staff are exemplary. High praise. His smile sharpened. Though I notice you've been making changes. New equipment, repairs, little improvements here and there. Adrian must be pleased to have someone taking such interest in domestic matters. Adrian's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the room's temperature. The Duchess manages the household admirably, he said, as is her responsibility. Of course. Of course. I meant no criticism. Lucian settled back into his chair, making himself comfortable. I'm only surprised. You've never cared much for household management, Adrian. Odd that you'd give someone else so much latitude so quickly. Unless... He paused delicately. There's good news on the Heir front? Is that the reason for your sudden generosity? The silence that followed was excruciating. Elara felt heat flood her face. Not embarrassment, but fury. The bastard had done that deliberately, cornered her with a question that had no good answer. Admit there was no child and invite speculation about why. Lie and create expectations that would be exposed as false within months. That's hardly appropriate dinner conversation, Lucien, Adrian said, ice in every syllable. Isn't it? I thought producing heirs was rather the point of marriage in our circles. Forgive me if I've touched a nerve. You're staying for dinner, then? Elara asked, her voice saccharine sweet. How delightful. I'll have Mrs. Hallowell prepare a room. Actually, I was hoping to stay a bit longer. A week, perhaps? I have business in the area, and the manor is so much more comfortable than the inn. Of course, Adrian said, though his tone suggested it was anything but. Your family. Lucian's smile was triumphant. Wonderful. This will give us time to get properly acquainted, Your Grace. I'm sure we have much to discuss. After he'd been shown to his rooms, Elara found Adrian in his study. We need to talk about your cousin. Adrian didn't look up from his ledger. What about him? He's vicious. He's harmless. Adrian. She closed the door behind her. He came here to cause trouble. The comment about the heir wasn't accidental. He's testing for weaknesses. Lucian always tests. It's his nature. And what happens when he finds one? Adrian finally looked at her. What do you want me to do, Elara? Throw him out? He's family. He has a right to visit. He has the right, but that doesn't mean we have to make it pleasant. He's already trying to undermine me, and he's been here less than 2 hours. Then don't let him. Adrian returned to his ledger. You're stronger than that. The dismissal stung worse than any of Lucien's barbs. Elara left before she said something unforgivable. Over the next week, Lucian inserted himself into every corner of Thornfell's daily life. He joined them for every meal, his conversation a constant stream of veiled insults and pointed questions. He wandered the estate freely, charming the younger servants and asking careful questions about the Duchess's changes. He made a show of consulting with Adrian on estate business, subtly positioning himself as advisor and confidant. And he watched Elara constantly, not with attraction. She wasn't fool enough to mistake that for genuine interest. No, Lucien watched her the way a cat watched a mouse. Calculating distances. Planning strikes. She caught him in the library one afternoon, reading through the household accounts she'd left on the desk. Those are private, she said from the doorway. Lucian looked up without guilt. Are they? They were just sitting here. Fascinating reading, actually. You've been quite active in your reforms. New equipment, staff bonuses, facility improvements. Adrian must be spending a fortune on domestic comfort. Adrian approved every expenditure. Did he review them personally, or did he simply trust your judgment? Lucian closed the ledger with deliberate care. I only ask because my dear cousin has been known to be distracted, inattentive to details, especially when it comes to household minutiae. It would be easy for someone to take advantage. Are you accusing me of embezzlement? Of course not. Merely noting that significant funds have been redirected to domestic concerns under your management. Some might question the priorities. Then they should take it up with the Duke. Oh, I intend to. His smile was poison. Family looks out for family, after all. It would be negligent of me not to ensure Adrian's interests are protected. That evening at dinner, Lucien made good on his threat. Adrian, old friend, I've been reviewing some of the estate finances, purely out of interest, you understand, and I noticed the household budget has increased substantially in recent months. Almost 30% by my calculation. Adrian paused with his wine glass halfway to his lips. The Duchess has implemented necessary improvements. Necessary? Lucien cut into his beef with exaggerated precision. I'm sure they seemed so, but 30% is rather extraordinary, don't you think? Especially when the agricultural yields are down and tenant rents haven't increased. One wonders where the money's coming from. The reserve fund. Ah, yes, the reserve fund. The one meant for emergencies and unexpected crises. I suppose leaking roofs qualify, though one might argue they could have been addressed less expensively with basic repairs rather than complete renovations. Elara set down her fork. The servants' quarters were unsafe. Would you prefer we wait for someone to be injured? I prefer fiscal responsibility. But then, I'm not the one spending the money, am I? Lucien's tone was reasonable, almost kind. That made it worse. I'm only concerned that Adrian's generosity is being exploited. You're new to estate management, Your Grace. It's natural to be enthusiastic. But experience teaches us that every expense must be weighed against long-term sustainability. The improvements will increase efficiency and reduce long-term costs. In theory, but we don't operate on theory, do we? We operate on results. He turned to Adrian. Have you seen measurable returns on these investments yet? It's been 3 months, Elara said. Meaningful data requires time. Of course it does. Which is why I'm suggesting, respectfully, that perhaps future expenditures should be reviewed more carefully. Maybe even by someone with experience in estate economics. I'd be happy to consult, Adrian. Save you the trouble of auditing every domestic expense personally. The offer was brilliant in its cruelty. Refuse and appear negligent. Accept and undermine Elara's authority completely. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. That won't be necessary, he said finally. I trust the Duchess's judgment. Lucien's expression flickered, just for a second, with something ugly. Then the pleasant mask returned. As you wish. I only want what's best for the family. After dinner, Elara escaped to her rooms. She was shaking with rage and something worse than rage, fear. Because Lucien was right about one thing. She didn't have measurable results yet. The improvements were long-term investments that would pay off in staff retention, efficiency, and morale. But those weren't numbers she could put in a ledger to prove value in the short term. If Lucien pushed hard enough, he could make her look like an extravagant fool who'd manipulated a distracted husband into wasteful spending. Mary helped her undress in silence, clearly sensing her mood. He's a snake, that one, the girl said finally. Begging your pardon, ma'am, but Mr. Lucien has never brought anything but trouble to this house. What do you mean? Mary hesitated, then lowered her voice. It's not my place to say, but there's history between him and the Duke. Bad history. And Mr. Lucien's been waiting a long time for revenge. Revenge for what? I don't know all of it. Happened before I came. But I've heard whispers. Something about a woman, a betrayal. The Duke hasn't trusted him since, but family is family, so... She trailed off meaningfully. A woman. A betrayal. Elara filed that information away. Another piece of the puzzle that was Adrian Thornfell. Thank you, Mary. That's helpful. Just be careful, ma'am. He's more dangerous than he looks. The next morning, Elara woke with a plan forming. Lucien wanted to attack her through the household expenses? Fine. She'd give him something else to worry about. She requested a meeting with Mr. Garrett and Mrs. Hallowell together. I need detailed records, she told them. Every improvement we've made, every expense, and every measurable outcome. Staff retention rates. Efficiency metrics. Productivity increases. Maintenance cost reductions. Everything that demonstrates return on investment. Garrett frowned. That will take considerable time to compile. Then we'd better start now. Mr. Lucien has raised questions about fiscal responsibility. I intend to answer them thoroughly. You don't need to justify yourself to him, Mrs. Hallowell said sharply. He's not the Duke. No, but he has the Duke's ear and he's using it. I won't let him undermine the work we've done or the people who've benefited from it. Elara met their eyes steadily. I'm asking for your help. Will you give it? They exchanged glances. Of course, Garrett said. I'll begin pulling the financial data immediately. And I'll gather the operational metrics, Mrs. Hallowell added. Though I still say that man needs to be put in his place. He will be. With facts, he can't dispute. It took 4 days to compile everything. 4 days during which Lucian continued his campaign of subtle destruction, questioning every decision Elara made and positioning himself as Adrian's trusted advisor on estate matters. She endured it, smiled, remained gracious, and built her case. On the 5th day, she requested a formal meeting with Adrian and asked him to invite Lucian as well. They gathered in Adrian's study, Elara, Adrian, Lucian, Garrett, and Mrs. Hallowell. The tension was thick enough to cut. Thank you for coming, Elara began. Mr. Lucian has raised valid concerns about household expenditures, and I thought it appropriate to address them comprehensively. Lucian leaned back in his chair, confident. I appreciate your willingness to discuss this openly, Your Grace. Of course. Transparency is essential. She nodded to Garrett, who began distributing the report she'd prepared. As you'll see, that the household budget increased by 28% in the first quarter of my management. That figure is accurate. I'm glad we agree on the numbers, Lucian murmured. However, those expenditures have generated measurable returns. She walked them through it systematically. The new laundry equipment had reduced water usage by 15% and cut cleaning time by 1/3, allowing the same staff to process more with less waste. The kitchen upgrades had improved food storage and reduced spoilage. The servants' quarters repairs had eliminated sick days from damp-related illnesses and improved staff retention. They'd had 0 servants leave in 3 months, compared to an average of 4 departures per quarter previously. That's all very interesting, Lucian said when she finished. But you're still talking about expenses that benefit servants, not revenue that benefits the estate. Actually, Garrett interjected, if you'll refer to page 7, you'll see the projected cost savings over the next year. Staff recruitment and training costs alone account for significant savings when retention improves. And the efficiency gains translate directly to reduced operating costs. Lucian's jaw tightened. Projections aren't results. Then let's discuss results we can measure immediately, Elara said. Mrs. Hallowell? The housekeeper stood. In the 3 months since Her Grace took over household management, we've reduced our monthly supply expenditures by 12% through better vendor negotiations and waste reduction. We've also improved the quality of those supplies. The Duke's preference is for quality over cost cutting, as I understand it. It is, Adrian confirmed. He'd been silent until now, watching the presentation with unreadable eyes. Furthermore, Mrs. Hallowell continued, staff morale has improved significantly. Happy staff work harder and create fewer problems. That's difficult to quantify in ledger entries, but any experienced manager knows it's worth its weight in gold. Lucian tried a different angle. I don't dispute that cosmetic improvements have been made, but the fundamental question remains, were these the best use of reserve funds? Couldn't the same money have been invested in agricultural improvements or tenant infrastructure? It could have, Elara agreed. If the agricultural operations were struggling, but they're not, are they, Mr. Garrett? The steward shook his head. The farms are performing within expected ranges. Yields are down slightly due to weather, but that's consistent across the region. There are no critical infrastructure needs at present. So you chose to spend money on servants' comfort rather than productive investment, Lucian said flatly. I chose to invest in the people who enable everything else to function, Elara corrected. The estate doesn't run itself. It runs because skilled, dedicated people show up every day and do difficult work. If we don't maintain the systems that support them, those systems fail. And when they fail, everything else fails with them. How very egalitarian of you. How very practical of me. She held his gaze. I understand that you're concerned about the Duke's interests. That's admirable. But questioning every decision I make doesn't protect the estate. It undermines the management structure the Duke himself established when he gave me responsibility for household operations. Lucian's smile was razor thin. I question decisions that seem questionable. That's my right as family. It's your right to raise concerns with the Duke privately. It's not your right to publicly challenge my authority in front of the staff or interfere with daily operations. Elara, Adrian started. No. She didn't look away from Lucian. I've been patient. I've been accommodating. I've answered every question and justified every decision. But this isn't actually about fiscal responsibility, is it, Mr. Lucian? This is about you wanting to prove I'm incompetent so you can suggest to the Duke that I can't be trusted with authority. The room went dead silent. Lucien's pleasant mask cracked. That's a serious accusation. It's an accurate observation. You've been here a week, and you've spent that entire time trying to undermine me, questioning my judgment, insinuating I'm manipulating the Duke, suggesting I'm wasting his money, all while positioning yourself as the wise family member trying to protect him from his foolish wife. I'm trying to protect him from someone who's already proven she'll spend his money without restraint. I've spent within the budget the Duke approved. Every single expense was documented and justified. You've found no impropriety because there is none. What you've found is a woman who won't be intimidated by innuendo and social sabotage. Adrian, Lucian turned to him, are you going to let her speak to me this way? Adrian stood slowly. His face was unreadable, but his voice was steel. Elara has answered your concerns comprehensively and professionally. She's demonstrated measurable value from her management decisions. And she's right. Your questions have crossed the line from legitimate oversight to deliberate interference. I'm family. You're a guest, and if you continue to undermine my wife's authority, you'll no longer be welcome as either. The words dropped like stones into deep water. Lucian stared at Adrian as if he'd been slapped. You'd choose her over family? I'd choose competence over sabotage. Elara has earned her position through work. You're trying to undermine it through gossip and insinuation. Adrian's tone was colder than Elara had ever heard it. If you have legitimate concerns about estate management, bring them to me privately. If you continue this public campaign, you can find accommodation elsewhere. For a moment, Lucian looked like he might argue. Then he stood abruptly, his chair scraping across the floor. How times change, he said quietly. There was a time you'd have seen through someone like her, but I suppose we all have our blind spots. He looked at Elara with pure hatred. Enjoy your victory, Your Grace. I'm sure it will be very satisfying, while it lasts. He left without waiting for dismissal. The silence he left behind was profound. Mrs. Hallowell, Mr. Garrett, Adrian said. Thank you for your time. You're dismissed. They filed out quickly, leaving Elara alone with her husband. You didn't have to do that, she said finally. Yes, I did. He was out of line. He's family, like you said. Family doesn't excuse cruelty. Adrian moved to the window, his back to her. Lucian has always known exactly where to stick the knife. I should have stopped him sooner. Why didn't you? Because I wanted to see how you'd handle him. He turned to face her. And you handled him perfectly. The presentation was thorough. Your arguments were sound. You didn't let him bait you into emotion until you'd already won on facts. Is that a compliment? It's an observation. You're more capable than I gave you credit for. Elara should have felt triumphant. She'd faced down Lucian. She'd proven her competence. She'd won Adrian's public support. Instead, she felt hollow. You tested me, she said. You let him attack me for a week so you could see if I'd break. I let him reveal his intentions while you built your defense. There's a difference. Is there? From where I'm standing, it feels like you sacrificed my comfort to satisfy your curiosity. Adrian's expression hardened. I didn't sacrifice anything. You were never in real danger. You don't get to decide what feels dangerous to me. She stood, gathering the reports. Thank you for the support. It was very useful, very strategic. Elara, I need to return these to Mr. Garrett. Excuse me. She left before he could respond. In the hallway, she nearly collided with Mary, who was hovering anxiously. Ma'am, are you all right? We heard shouting. I'm fine, Mary. Is Mr. Lucien packing? Already done, ma'am. He left 10 minutes ago, took his bags and rode out without a word to anyone. Good. One problem solved. But as Elara climbed the stairs to her room, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd traded one problem for another. She'd proven herself to Adrian, but in doing so, she'd revealed just how much she'd had to prove, how little he'd trusted her from the start, how little he trusted anyone. That night, she did not go down to dinner. She told Mary she had a headache, which wasn't entirely a lie. Her head pounded with exhaustion and suppressed fury. Around 9, there was a knock on her door. Adrian. May I come in? She should say no, should send him away, should maintain the distance that was clearly all he wanted anyway. Yes. He entered, closing the door behind him. He looked uncomfortable, uncertain in a way she'd never seen before. I owe you an apology, he said. Of all the things she'd expected, that wasn't one of them. For what specifically? She asked. There are several options. His mouth twitched, almost a smile. For allowing Lucien to torment you, for testing you instead of trusting you, for treating you like a problem to be managed rather than a partner. Partner, Elara repeated. That's an interesting word choice. It's the accurate one. You've proven that. He moved closer, then stopped, as if unsure how near was appropriate. You've done more for this estate in 3 months than I've accomplished in 3 years. The staff respects you. The household runs better. Even Garrett admits you have a talent for management. High praise from Mr. Garrett. The highest. Adrian ran a hand through his hair, the first uncontrolled gesture she'd seen from him. I'm not good at this. At people. At trust. Lucian's right about that much. I do see threats everywhere. Why? The question hung between them. Adrian was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, slowly, he spoke. Because the last time I trusted someone, they betrayed me in the worst possible way. And I swore I'd never be that vulnerable again. Lucien? Among others. His voice was careful, controlled again. It doesn't matter. Ancient history. It matters if it's still controlling how you treat people. I'm aware of my limitations, Elara. I don't need them cataloged. I'm not cataloging. I'm trying to understand. Why? What difference does understanding make? Because we're married, she said, frustrated. Because we live in the same house and share the same name, and we're supposed to be building something together, except you won't let me close enough to build anything. You test me, you approve my budgets, you defend me when it's strategic, but you don't actually trust me. And I can't keep living like this, like I'm on permanent probation. Adrian's face was unreadable. What do you want from me? I want you to see me as a person instead of a function. I want to know why you're so broken that you can't let anyone in. She stopped, the words catching in her throat. I want this marriage to be more than a business arrangement where we both pretend we're fine with being strangers. I never pretended to be fine with it. Then what do you want, Adrian? Because I can't figure it out. You don't want me as a wife. You don't want me as a friend. You don't even want me as a competent employee. You want me as a perfectly managed asset who produces heirs and doesn't complicate your life. That's not fair, isn't it? Tell me what you actually want from me that isn't duty or obligation or producing the next generation of Thornfells. Silence. Elara laughed, bitter. That's what I thought. She turned away, done with this conversation, done with everything. But Adrian caught her wrist, gentle but firm. The first time he'd touched her since their wedding night. He stopped, started again. I don't know what I want, but it's not what you're describing. Then tell me what it is. I can't, because I don't know how to want anything beyond survival anymore. The raw honesty of it shocked her. She turned back to face him. His hand was still on her wrist, warm and uncertain. What happened to you? She asked softly. Nothing I'm ready to talk about. Then when will you be ready? I don't know. His thumb moved against her pulse point, unconscious maybe, or desperate. But I know I don't want you to leave. I'm not leaving. I can't. We're married. I don't mean physically. I mean this. Whatever this is becoming, don't pull away completely, even if I deserve it. Elara looked at him, really looked, and saw something she hadn't expected. Fear. Genuine human fear that she'd stop trying, that she'd give up on him the way he'd clearly given up on himself. It would be so easy to walk away emotionally, to accept the cold marriage he'd offered and stop fighting for anything more. But she'd never been good at easy. I won't pull away, she said. But you have to meet me halfway, Adrian. You have to try. Not just approve my budgets or defend me when it's convenient, but actually try to let me in. I don't know if I can. Then learn, because I'm not doing this alone anymore. He nodded slowly. His hand fell away from her wrist. I'll try, he said. I can't promise I'll be good at it, but I'll try. It wasn't a declaration of love. It wasn't even a promise of friendship. But it was something. For now, that would have to be enough. For now, that would have to be enough. But enough proved harder to define than either of them expected. The days after Lucien's departure were strange, tentative in a way that made Elara feel like she was walking on ice that might crack at any moment. Adrian didn't transform overnight. He didn't suddenly become warm or open or anything resembling the partner she'd asked for, but he showed up for dinner more often, asked questions about her day that seemed genuinely curious rather than perfunctory. Stopped leaving rooms the moment she entered them. Small things. Microscopic, really. But Elara noticed every single one. 6 weeks after their confrontation, she was in the estate office reviewing tenant applications when Adrian appeared in the doorway. "Do you have a moment?" She looked up, surprised. He never sought her out during work hours. "Of course." He entered, carrying a leather portfolio. "I've been thinking about expanding the southern farms, converting some of the fallow land to wheat. Garrett thinks it's viable, but I wanted your opinion before committing resources." Elara blinked. "You want my opinion on agricultural planning? You have a good head for economics, and you understand resource allocation better than most." He set the portfolio on the desk between them. "I thought you might see problems I'm missing." It was such a small thing, such a normal thing. But the fact that he'd asked, that he'd voluntarily included her in a decision that had nothing to do with household management, felt seismic. She opened the portfolio and studied the plans. "The water access is poor on the southern parcels," she said after several minutes. "You'd need irrigation infrastructure, which would eat the first 2 years' profits. Have you considered the eastern fields instead? They're smaller, but there's a natural spring that runs through the property. Less upfront investment." Adrian leaned over her shoulder, looking at the maps. "I hadn't thought of that. The eastern fields have always been pasture. They don't have to stay that way. Crop rotation could actually improve the soil quality for future grazing." He was quiet, studying the maps with that intense focus he brought to everything. Then slowly, he smiled. Actually, smiled. "You're right. That's better." He looked at her. "Thank you." "You're welcome." The moment stretched between them. Not uncomfortable, but charged with something neither of them seemed ready to name. Then Adrian straightened, professional distance reasserting itself. "I'll have Garrett draw up revised plans. If you have time later, I'd appreciate your review before we finalize anything." "I'll make time." He left, and Elara sat staring at the maps, feeling like something fundamental had shifted without her quite understanding what. That evening, Mrs. Hallowell found her in the library. "Begging your pardon, Your Grace, but you need to see this." The housekeeper's face was grim. She handed Elara a letter, expensive paper, elegant handwriting, sealed with wax Elara didn't recognize. "It came this afternoon. Private courier. Addressed to you specifically." Elara broke the seal and read. The letter was from someone named Victoria Ashford. The name meant nothing to Elara, but the content made her stomach drop. "Dear Duchess Thornfell, I hope this letter finds you well, though I suspect its contents may disturb your newfound domestic tranquility. I feel it my duty to inform you of certain facts regarding your husband's past that he has likely neglected to mention. 6 years ago, Adrian Thornfell was engaged to marry my sister, Caroline Ashford. The engagement was publicly announced, the wedding planned, the future secured. Until 3 months before the ceremony, when Adrian discovered that Caroline and his dear cousin Lucien had been carrying on an affair for nearly a year. The scandal was suppressed. Money has that effect. But the damage was done. Caroline married Lucien in disgrace. Adrian became the cold, untrusting man you now call husband. And the Ashford family was left to pick up the pieces of our shattered reputation. I write not out of malice, but concern. You should know that the man you married is broken beyond repair. Whatever he promised you, whatever you hoped to build with him, understand that his capacity for trust died the day he found Caroline in Lucien's bed. He will never love you. He will never truly let you in. You are simply the womb that replaces the one that betrayed him. Consider this a kindness, a warning from someone who watched her sister destroy a good man and create a monster. Yours in sympathy, Victoria Ashford." Elara read it twice, then a third time. "Ma'am?" Mrs. Hallowell's voice was careful. "Are you all right? Did you know about this?" The housekeeper hesitated. We all knew something had happened. The Duke changed after whatever it was, became harder, more distant. But the details were kept quiet. The staff who were here then were dismissed or sworn to silence. He was going to marry someone else. He was going to marry the wrong person, as it turned out. Better to discover it before the vows than after. Elara looked up. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, it seems like discovering it before just meant he was free to marry someone else while still being completely ruined for any kind of real partnership. Mrs. Hallowell had no answer for that. That night, Elara couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the letter's words circling her mind like vultures. You are simply the womb that replaces the one that betrayed him. She'd known Adrian was damaged. She'd seen the walls, felt the distance, recognized the wound even if she hadn't known its source. But knowing the specifics somehow made it worse, because now she understood exactly what she was fighting, not just general mistrust, but the ghost of a woman who'd taken Adrian's capacity for love and burned it to ash. Around 2 a.m, she gave up on sleep and went to the library. Adrian was there. He looked up from his book, surprised. Elara, can't sleep? No. She closed the door behind her. We need to talk. Something in her tone made him set the book down. What's wrong? She crossed to his desk and placed the letter in front of him. He read it, and with each line his face went progressively blanker, that terrible, controlled nothing that meant he was feeling everything. When he finished, he folded the letter precisely and set it aside. Victoria always did have impeccable timing, he said. His voice was almost casual. Almost. Is it true? Which part? All of it. The engagement, the affair, finding them together. Adrian stood and moved to the window. Yes. Just that. Yes, like confirming the weather. Why didn't you tell me? What difference would it have made? The outcome was the same, regardless of the history. The difference, Elara said, her voice shaking, is that I could have understood why you are the way you are. Why you can't trust. Why you treat me like I'm going to betray you at any moment. I don't... You do. You absolutely do. Every time you test me, every time you hold back, every time you look at me like you're waiting for me to prove Victoria's letter right. He turned to face her. What do you want me to say, Elara? That I'm sorry I'm not the husband you deserve? I've already admitted that. That I'm damaged beyond repair? Victoria was kind enough to inform you of that herself. I want you to stop acting like I'm Caroline. The name hung between them like a curse. I don't think you're Caroline, Adrian said quietly. Don't you? Because from where I'm standing, you're punishing me for her sins. You married me specifically because I'm not her. Not passionate, not impulsive, not the kind of woman who'd inspire that kind of feeling. You chose safety over risk, and now you're surprised that safety feels empty. That's not fair. None of this is fair, she was shouting now, control finally breaking. It's not fair that she destroyed you. It's not fair that Lucien betrayed you. It's not fair that I'm the one paying the price for their cruelty. But here we are, Adrian. Here we are in this beautiful prison you've built where nothing can hurt you because nothing can touch you. You think I want to be like this? His own control was cracking. You think I enjoy being incapable of the most basic human connection? I hate what they made me. I hate that I can't look at you without wondering when you'll tire of this arrangement and find someone more interesting. I hate that I'm so broken I can't even accept kindness without suspecting ulterior motives. Then fix it. I don't know how. The admission seemed to shock them both. Adrian's shoulders sagged. He suddenly looked exhausted, decades older than his 33 years. I don't know how to be anything other than this, he said, quieter now. I tried. After it happened, I tried to move past it. But every time I thought I'd healed, something would remind me, and I realized I hadn't healed. I'd just gotten better at building walls, until the walls were all that was left. Elara felt her anger deflate. It was hard to stay furious with someone who just admitted they were drowning. What happened when you found them? She asked. Adrian was silent for a long moment. Then haltingly, he spoke. I came back early from an estate visit. Wanted to surprise Caroline. I had a ring, an heirloom, my grandmother's. I was going to give it to her that night. He laughed, bitter. I surprised her all right. Found her in my bed with Lucien, my cousin, my best friend. The person I trusted more than anyone except her. Adrian, the worst part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the look on their faces when I walked in. Not guilt, not shame, relief, like they'd been waiting for me to find out so they didn't have to hide anymore. He met her eyes. Caroline told me she'd never loved me, that I was too cold, too distant, too focused on duty, that Lucien made her feel alive in ways I never could. And Lucien just smiled and said he'd been doing me a favor, showing me what Caroline really was before I trapped myself in a loveless marriage. That's monstrous. That's the truth, at least their version of it. Adrian moved to the sideboard, poured himself whiskey, drank it in one swallow. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was too cold, too distant. Maybe if I'd been different, more open, she wouldn't have needed to look elsewhere. No. Elara crossed to him. No, Adrian, what they did wasn't about your failings. It was about their selfishness and cruelty. You don't betray someone you claim to love just because they're not demonstrative enough. You talk to them. You work on it. You don't destroy them and then blame them for not being worth staying for. You sound very certain. I am certain, because I know what it's like to be treated as expendable by someone who's supposed to value you. My father sold me to secure his debts. You married me to secure your bloodline. Neither of us has been particularly valued for who we are rather than what we provide. She took the glass from his hand, but that doesn't mean we have to accept that this is all we deserve. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we stop letting our damage define our limits. You were betrayed. I was commodified. Those are facts, but they don't have to be prophecies. Elara I'm not asking you to love me, Adrian. I'm not even asking you to trust me completely, but I'm asking you to stop waiting for me to hurt you, because I won't. Not deliberately. Not because I'm noble or perfect. I'm neither. But because I have no interest in becoming another person who made you smaller. He studied her face like he was seeing her for the first time. What do you want from this marriage? A partnership. An actual one. Not the pretend version where you make decisions and I manage the house and we're polite strangers who share a name. And if I can't give you that, then we'll fail together instead of separately, but at least we'll have tried. Adrian was quiet for so long she thought he'd refuse. Then slowly, he nodded. All right, we try. Really try. No more testing, no more holding back out of fear. He took a breath. And I'll tell you everything. About Caroline, about Lucien, about why I am the way I am. Not tonight, I can't tonight, but soon. You deserve to know who you married beyond the title and the damage. It was more than she'd expected, more than she'd hoped for, honestly. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I'll probably be terrible at this. Probably, but I'm not exactly experienced at functional partnerships either. We'll figure it out together. She meant it as reassurance. But the word, together, seemed to hit Adrian harder than any accusation had. His expression crumbled for just a second, raw grief and longing flashing across his face before control reasserted itself. But Elara had seen it, and she understood finally what Adrian Thornfell actually wanted, and was too afraid to ask for. He wanted someone to stay, not because they had to, not because of contracts or duty or social obligation, but because they chose to. Because he was worth choosing, damage and all. She reached out and took his hand. He flinched, actual physical flinch, but didn't pull away. I'm not going anywhere, she said softly. You say that now. I'll say it as many times as you need to hear it. They stood like that for several minutes, hands clasped in the quiet library while the fire burned low. It wasn't romantic, it wasn't even particularly comfortable, but it was honest. And honesty, Elara was learning, was far more valuable than comfort. The next morning, she woke to find a note slipped under her door. Join me for breakfast in the small dining room. Just us. No formality. She dressed quickly and went down to find Adrian already there, looking nervous in a way she'd never seen before. Thank you for coming, he said. You invited me to breakfast in my own house. I wasn't going to refuse. You could have. I would have understood. Adrian, stop expecting rejection. I'm here. I'm staying. She sat across from him. Now, what's this about? He poured her tea. I thought we should establish some ground rules for this partnership we're attempting. All right. First, honesty. Complete honesty. If something bothers you, say it. Don't let it fester. Agreed. Same goes for you. Second, No more separate lives. We're married. We should act like it. Shared meals, shared decisions, shared everything that can reasonably be shared. Elara raised an eyebrow. Everything? He actually blushed. Within appropriate boundaries. I'm not suggesting that is, I know the physical aspect of our marriage has been neglected, but I don't want to pressure Adrian. She took pity on him. We can address that when we're both ready. No pressure either direction. What else? He visibly relaxed. Third, we present a united front. Always. Especially with people like Lucien who will look for cracks to exploit. Definitely agreed. And fourth, he hesitated. If this doesn't work, if we try and it still fails, we acknowledge it honestly instead of pretending everything's fine. That was darker than she'd expected. You're already planning for failure? I'm planning for honesty. If we're miserable, we should admit it, not compound the damage by forcing something that can't work. Fair enough. Though I don't plan on failing, neither do I. But I've learned to prepare for disappointment. Then I'll just have to make sure you're disappointed less often. The breakfast was stilted at first. Years of distance didn't evaporate over eggs and toast. But they talked, actually talked, about the estate, about upcoming social obligations, about Mrs. Hallowell's suggestion that they host a small dinner for the neighboring gentry. Do you want to? Adrian asked. Host a dinner? Do you? I asked you first. And I'm asking what you prefer. This is a shared decision, remember? He considered, I don't enjoy social performance, but it's been years since Thornfell hosted anything. People are curious about you. A dinner would satisfy that curiosity and prevent worse speculation. Then we'll do it. Small, intimate, people we can manage. She paused. Will you help me plan it? I know the household logistics, but I don't know these people or the social dynamics. You want my help? I want your partnership, which includes your knowledge and experience. Something shifted in his expression, surprise giving way to something almost like hope. All right, yes. We'll plan it together. The dinner preparations consumed the next 2 weeks. Elara had Mrs. Hallowell coordinate the household side, while she and Adrian worked together on guest lists, menu planning, and social strategy. It was surprisingly easy working with him. He knew everyone's history, their alliances, their grievances. She understood hosting dynamics and how to structure an evening for maximum smoothness. Together, they created something balanced, small enough to be manageable, large enough to make a statement. You're good at this, Adrian said one evening as they finalized seating arrangements. At dinner planning? At strategy. At seeing how pieces fit together and using that to your advantage. I learned from necessity. When you're powerless, you learn to understand power. Who has it, how they use it, where the vulnerabilities are. Were you powerless? In your father's house? It was the first truly personal question he'd asked her. Elara considered deflecting, but they'd agreed on honesty. Completely. My brothers inherited. My mother died when I was young. My father saw me as a bargaining chip, valuable only for whatever alliance I could secure through marriage. I had no money of my own, no prospects, no options except to marry well, or become a burden. That must have been frightening. It was clarifying. I learned quickly that if I wanted any control over my life, I'd have to take it quietly. So I watched. I learned. I made myself useful in ways that gave me information and influence without threatening the men who held the real power. And then you married me. And then I married you and discovered I'd traded one form of powerlessness for another. Except here, I actually have tools to work with, resources, position, a husband who, for all his damage, is at least willing to let me use my capabilities. You make it sound transactional, isn't it? We're both getting something from this arrangement. You get your heir, I get security and authority I never had before. There's nothing wrong with acknowledging the transaction. Adrian was quiet, then, carefully, what if I want it to be more than a transaction? Elara's breath caught. What do you mean? I mean, Caroline was right about one thing. I was focused on duty, on what marriage was supposed to provide rather than what it could be. I don't want to make that mistake again. With you. Adrian, I'm not declaring love. I'm not capable of that. Or at least, I don't think I am anymore. But I do want this to be real. Whatever real looks like for us. Real meaning what? Meaning I care whether you're happy. Meaning I want to know you, not just manage you. Meaning, when I think about the future, I'd like to imagine it with you actually in it. Not just present, but present. It was the most vulnerable thing he'd ever said to her. Possibly the most vulnerable thing he'd said to anyone in 6 years. I'd like that too, Elara said. Real sounds good. His smile was small but genuine. Then we're agreed. We'll try for real. We'll try for real. The dinner party was scheduled for a Saturday evening. 20 guests, a carefully curated mix of neighbors, minor gentry, and 1 or 2 influential figures whose goodwill was worth cultivating. Everything was planned perfectly. The menu was excellent. The house looked immaculate. Elara wore a gown that was elegant without being ostentatious, and Adrian looked every inch the Duke. They stood together in the entrance hall, waiting for the first guests to arrive. Nervous? He asked. Terrified. You? Same. But we'll manage. Together. Together. The first hour went smoothly. Guests arrived, were received, complimented the house, and the hostess in turns. Elara moved through the crowd with Adrian at her side, a united front just as they'd practiced. She was actually starting to relax when the last carriage arrived, and Lucian Thornfell stepped out. Elara felt Adrian go rigid beside her. You didn't invite him, she said quietly. I didn't. Lucian approached with that familiar cruel smile. But he wasn't alone. The woman on his arm was beautiful, delicate features, blonde hair, blue eyes that held calculation beneath their sweetness. Adrian, cousin, I hope you don't mind the intrusion. When I heard you were hosting, I simply had to attend, and I brought someone I thought you'd be delighted to see. He gestured to the woman. You remember Caroline, of course, my wife. The world seemed to stop. Caroline, the woman who'd destroyed Adrian, who'd taken his trust and burned it, smiled prettily. Adrian, it's been so long, and you must be the new Duchess. How lovely to finally meet you. She extended her hand like she was greeting old friends, instead of walking into the home of the man she'd betrayed. Elara looked at Adrian. His face was completely blank. That terrible controlled nothing that meant he was fracturing inside. Every eye in the entrance hall was on them, watching, waiting to see how the Duke and his wife would react to this calculated cruelty. This was the test, the real one. Not Lucien's financial questions or public challenges, but this, watching Adrian face the woman who'd broken him while maintaining dignity in front of their entire social circle. Elara made a decision. She stepped forward, deliberately ignoring Caroline's extended hand. What a surprise, she said, her voice carrying clearly. I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. This is an intimate dinner for invited guests only. We're not receiving uninvited visitors this evening, regardless of their historical connections to the family. Lucian's smile sharpened. Surely you're not turning away family, Your Grace. That would be dreadfully rude. Not nearly as rude as arriving uninvited to someone's home with the deliberate intention of causing discomfort. I may be new to the position, but I understand basic courtesy. She looked at Adrian. Darling, would you like to handle this, or shall I? It was a risk, putting the decision back on him. But she'd promised partnership, and that meant trusting him to stand with her. For one horrible second, she thought he'd fold, thought the sight of Caroline would undo all the progress they'd made. Then Adrian moved to her side. Close. A statement. I think my wife has made our position clear, he said. His voice was steady, cold. You're not welcome here, Lucien. Neither is your wife. Please leave before I have you forcibly removed. Caroline's pretty face twisted. Adrian, don't be like this. It's been 6 years. Surely we can be civilized. Civilized? Adrian's laugh was sharp. You want to discuss civility after what you did? After you betrayed me in the worst possible way and then had the audacity to marry my cousin? We fell in love. These things happen. You fell into his bed 3 months before our wedding. That's not love, that's selfishness. And I'm done pretending your betrayal was anything less than deliberate cruelty. He took Elara's hand. Now get out of my house. Both of you. Before I forget, I'm a gentleman. The entrance hall was dead silent. Lucien looked like he wanted to argue, but the assembled guests were clearly on Adrian's side. The violation of bringing Caroline here was too blatant, too cruel. This isn't over, Lucian said quietly. You think you've won by finding some clever wife to fight your battles? You're more pathetic than I thought. I think, Elara said sweetly, that you're projecting. Now leave before I have the footmen remove you. And trust me, it won't be gentle. They left. The door closed behind them, and the entrance hall erupted in murmured conversation. Shock, approval, scandal deliciously witnessed. Adrian's hand was trembling in hers. I need a moment, he said quietly. Can you? I'll handle the guests. Go. I'll be fine. He disappeared toward his study, and Elara turned to face 20 curious, excited guests alone. She took a breath, smiled, and became exactly what they needed her to be. The gracious hostess moving past an awkward moment with perfect poise. Well, she said lightly, that was unpleasant. Shall we proceed to dinner? I promise the entertainment will improve significantly once we're seated. Laughter, relief. The moment broke. They moved to the dining room and Elara orchestrated the evening flawlessly, directing conversation, smoothing awkward moments, making sure everyone felt attended to despite her husband's absence. She didn't see Adrian for the rest of the dinner. When the last guest finally left, she found him in the library. He was sitting in the dark, staring at nothing. Adrian? I'm sorry. His voice was raw. I'm sorry I left you to manage that alone. I couldn't. I understand. Do you? Because I feel like I failed you tonight. Failed the one test that actually mattered. You didn't fail. You stood up to them. You chose me over avoiding confrontation. That's not failure. I ran away. You took a moment when you needed it. There's a difference. She sat beside him. Adrian, you faced the woman who destroyed you and didn't break. You didn't forgive her. You didn't pretend everything was fine. You drew a line and defended it. That's strength, not weakness. I still can't believe they came, that Lucien would be that cruel. I can. He's been waiting for an opportunity to hurt you. This was it. She paused. But he failed, because we didn't break. We stood together and everyone saw it. Adrian turned to look at her. You were magnificent tonight. I was angry. I channeled it productively. You could have let me drown, made me handle it alone as punishment for bringing all this drama into your life. That's not what partners do. No, I suppose it's not. He was quiet for a moment. Elara? Yes? Thank you. For tonight. For not making me face them alone. You're welcome. But she knew, they both knew, that this wasn't over. Lucien had been embarrassed publicly, Caroline had been rejected again, and neither of them were the type to accept humiliation quietly. They'd retaliate. The only question was how. The answer came 3 days later in the form of a letter delivered directly to the manor, not to Adrian, to Elara. She opened it in the privacy of her room. Dear Duchess, you must be feeling very proud of yourself. You stood by your damaged husband and proved yourself the loyal wife. How touching. But loyalty won't protect you from the truth. Ask Adrian about the real reason Caroline left him. Ask him about what he did that drove her into my arms. Ask him why he's so desperate to control everything around him. Or better yet, ask yourself why a man who claims to want partnership still hasn't touched you. Why you sleep alone every night. Why he married you for duty but can't bring himself to actually fulfill it. He's using you, Duchess, just like he used Caroline. And when you finally see him for what he is, you'll understand why she needed to escape. Consider this a kindness, a warning before you waste any more of your life on a man who will never be capable of truly seeing you as anything more than an obligation. L. Elara read it twice, then carried it straight to Adrian's study and placed it on his desk. Read this. He did, and with each line his face went progressively paler. Elara. Is any of it true? Which part? Any of it. Did you do something that drove Caroline away? Are you using me? Is our marriage the lie Lucian's suggesting? Adrian stood abruptly. You're asking if I believe his version of events over mine? I'm asking for the truth, the whole truth, because I'm tired of discovering new pieces of your history through malicious letters. Her voice was shaking. I can't defend you if I don't know what I'm defending against. You want the whole truth? His voice was rising. Fine, here it is. I wasn't perfect with Caroline. I worked too much. I wasn't demonstrative. I took her for granted sometimes because I thought we had forever. But I didn't abuse her. I didn't control her. I didn't do anything to justify what she did. And us? Our marriage? What about it? Are you using me? Because the letters write about one thing. You haven't touched me. We're married in name only. And I've told myself it's because you're damaged, because you need time. But what if Lucien's right? What if this is just you repeating the same patterns? I haven't touched you because I'm terrified I'll ruin this too. The words exploded out of him. Because every time I think about actually making this marriage real, actually letting myself want you, I remember what happened the last time I let myself want someone. And I freeze, because I can't survive that again, Elara. I can't. The admission hung between them. So yes, he continued, quieter now. Maybe I am using you as a shield against loneliness, using you to produce heirs without risking actual intimacy, using you to prove I've moved on when I clearly haven't. Is that what you wanted to hear? Elara felt something break inside her chest. No, I wanted to hear that you're trying, that we're building something real. We are. At least I thought. He stopped, looked at her. What do you want from me right now? I want you to fight for this. For us. Not just go through motions or make plans for partnership while keeping me at arm's length emotionally and physically. I want you to actually want this marriage. Want me. Not as an obligation or a safer version of Caroline, but as me. I do want you. Then prove it. The words came out as a challenge, a demand. Adrian stared at her, and something in his expression shifted, fear giving way to something darker, more desperate. He crossed the space between them in 3 strides and kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was fierce and messy and tasted like desperation. His hands gripped her waist like she might disappear, her fingers tangled in his hair. Months of tension and frustration and denied want came spilling out in that kiss. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. Is that proof enough? Adrian asked, his voice rough. Elara's heart was pounding. It's a start. Then what? But she kissed him again before he could finish the question. Because talking was what had gotten them into this mess. Talking and thinking and analyzing instead of just feeling. She was done thinking. They stumbled backward until Adrian's back hit his desk. Papers scattered, the whole careful organization of his controlled life disrupted. Elara, don't you dare stop, she warned. Don't you dare go back to being careful and distant. Not now. I don't want you to try. I want you to just be. With me. However imperfect that is. His laugh was breathless. Imperfect I can manage. He pulled her closer, and for the first time since their wedding, Elara felt like she was actually married. Not legally bound, but chosen. Wanted. Real. Then someone knocked on the study door. They sprang apart like guilty teenagers. Your Grace? Mr. Garrett's voice came through the wood. I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's an urgent matter requiring your attention. Adrian straightened his clothes with shaking hands. What is it? It's the Southern Farms, sir. There's been an incident. Lucien has been seen meeting with several of your tenants, making offers. Adrian's expression hardened. What kind of offers? We're not certain yet, but 3 families have requested early termination of their leases. Coincidentally, all 3 met with Lucien yesterday. Elara felt cold dread pool in her stomach. He's trying to sabotage the estate. So it appears. Garrett's voice was grim even through the door. I thought you should know immediately. Adrian looked at Elara. Whatever had been building between them a moment ago was gone, replaced by the familiar mask of control. We'll deal with this, he said. Not we'll deal with this together, just we'll deal with this. And just like that, she could feel him retreating again. Adrian, not now, Elara. This is serious. I know it's serious. That's why we should. I said not now. The door opened before she could respond. Garrett stood there looking apologetic but determined. I've taken the liberty of arranging a meeting with the tenants in question for tomorrow morning, he said to Adrian. If you'd like to be present. I'll be there. Adrian moved toward the door, stopped, looked back at Elara. We'll talk later. About everything. But she knew they wouldn't, because Lucien had just handed Adrian the perfect excuse to run back to safety, back to duty and control and all the familiar walls that kept actual feeling at bay. and Elara was standing in the ruins of a moment that had almost been something real, watching her husband choose crisis management over vulnerability. "Of course," she said. "Later." He left with Garrett. And Elara stood alone in the study, papers scattered across the floor, her lips still tingling from a kiss that had promised everything and delivered her right back to loneliness. Lucien wasn't just trying to destroy the estate, he was trying to destroy them. And he was winning. And he was winning. The thought burned through Elara's mind as she stood in Adrian's empty study, surrounded by scattered papers, and the ghost of a moment that had felt like progress, like possibility, like they'd finally broken through the walls that kept them strangers. Then Lucien had knocked, metaphorically, through Garrett's interruption, and Adrian had run straight back to safety, back to duty, back to the comfortable distance where feelings couldn't hurt him. Well, screw that. Elara bent and began gathering the papers from the floor. Her hands were shaking, from rage or leftover desire or both. She couldn't tell. But as she straightened the scattered documents, a pattern emerged. Lease agreements, tenant contracts, agricultural reports, the southern farms. She carried everything to the desk and started reading properly, not just skimming, but analyzing, looking for weaknesses, for leverage, for whatever Lucien was exploiting. It took 3 hours, but she found it. The southern farm leases were structured on annual renewals with a 60-day termination clause. Standard enough. But 3 of the families, the ones Garrett mentioned, had lease renewals coming up in the next month, and their contract language included a provision allowing early termination if they could demonstrate significant hardship or better opportunity. Lucien was offering them better terms somewhere else, probably on land he controlled or had influence over. Poach the tenants, destabilize Thornfell's agricultural production, create chaos Adrian would have to manage. It was elegant, really, and completely legal. But it relied on one assumption, that the tenants valued money over loyalty. Elara had spent 3 months building relationships with the household staff. She'd learned their names, fixed their problems, made them feel seen. The principle was the same for tenant farmers. People didn't leave when they felt valued. They left when they felt expendable. Adrian treated his tenants fairly and paid them well. But fair wasn't the same as valued, and Lucien was betting Adrian had never bothered to make the distinction. Elara made a decision. She found Mary in the servants' hall and pulled her aside. "I need you to do something for me, something unusual." The girl's eyes widened. "Of course, ma'am. Anything." "I need you to get me the names and locations of the 3 farming families considering leaving, and I need you to do it quietly, without anyone, especially the Duke, knowing I asked." Mary hesitated. "Mr. Garrett knows who they are, ma'am. He mentioned them to the Duke." "I know, but I'm asking you because I trust you to be discreet. Can you do it?" "Yes, ma'am, but may I ask why?" Elara smiled grimly. "Because the Duke is going to handle this like a business negotiation, and I'm going to handle it like a relationship that matters. Between us, maybe one of those approaches will work." Mary grinned. "I'll have the information within the hour." She did. And by evening, Elara had a plan. The next morning, she woke before dawn and dressed in her simplest day dress. Practical, worn, nothing that screamed Duchess. She borrowed one of the kitchen cloaks and slipped out through the servants' entrance before anyone could question her. The first farm belonged to the Walsh family. Thomas Walsh, his wife Margaret, and 4 children ranging from 6 to 15. They'd been Thornfell tenants for 12 years, according to the records. Elara found Margaret in the kitchen garden, harvesting early vegetables. The woman looked up, startled, when Elara approached. "Your Grace, we weren't expecting—" "I'm sorry to arrive unannounced, Mrs. Walsh. I was hoping we could talk." Margaret wiped her hands on her apron, nervous. "Of course. Should I fetch Thomas?" "Actually, I'd like to speak with you first, if that's all right." They sat at the worn kitchen table. The house was small but clean, clearly maintained with care despite limited resources. Evidence of children everywhere, drawings on the walls, shoes by the door, a half-finished school primer on the windowsill. "I'll be direct," Elara said. "I know you're considering leaving Thornfell. I'm not here to pressure you to stay. I'm here to understand why you'd want to go." Margaret's face flushed. "It's not. We've been happy here, Your Grace. The Duke is a fair landlord. It's just what? Mr. Lucien made an offer. Better land, lower rent for the first 3 years. A school nearby for the children. We've been struggling to get them educated properly this far out. She twisted her apron in her hands. Thomas says we'd be fools not to take it, that we have to think of the children's future. And what do you say? Margaret looked surprised by the question. Me? You're their mother. You run this household. Your opinion matters. I say we've built a life here. The other tenants are like family. Mrs. Hallowell sends down preserves every autumn. The Duke repaired our roof last spring without us even asking. It's not just land to me. It's home. Her eyes filled. But Thomas is right. We have to think practically. Better opportunity is better opportunity. What if the opportunity here improved? How do you mean? Elara leaned forward. The Duke and I have been discussing expanding educational resources for tenant families. We were thinking of bringing in a traveling teacher, someone who could circuit between the farms a few days each week. Would that make a difference? Margaret's eyes widened. A teacher? Here? Here. And we're also considering infrastructure improvements, better roads, enhanced water access for the southern parcels. Not promises, Mrs. Walsh. Actual plans with timelines and budgets. She paused. But I'll be honest with you. We can't do any of that if half our tenants leave. We need people who are invested in Thornfell's future. People who want to build something, not just extract profit and move on. You're asking us to stay. I'm asking you to consider whether Mr. Lucian's offer is actually better or just shinier, because I've seen his kind before, Mrs. Walsh. Men who make big promises to get what they want, then forget those promises once they have you locked in. The Duke may not be warm, but he's reliable, and he actually cares about this land and the people on it, even if he's terrible at showing it. Margaret was quiet for a long time. Then, carefully, if we stayed, would we really get a teacher? You have my word, within 3 months. And the Duke knows about this? About you coming here? The Duke is handling this his way. I'm handling it mine. Between us, we'll figure out what Thornfell needs, but I can't do that without honest people who'll tell me when things aren't working. People like you. I'll talk to Thomas, Margaret said finally. I can't promise anything, but I'll talk to him. That's all I ask. Elara visited the other 2 families before noon. The Hendersons, an older couple whose children had grown and moved away, farming out of habit more than ambition. And the Carvers, a young family just starting out, struggling under debt they'd inherited when the father's brother died. Same approach with all of them. Listen first. Understand their actual concerns, not just the surface complaints. Then address those concerns directly, honestly, without condescension or empty promises. By the time she returned to the manor, she was exhausted, muddy, and fairly certain she'd given Mrs. Hallowell a heart attack by disappearing without explanation. The housekeeper was waiting in Elara's chambers, agitated. Your Grace, where have you been? The Duke has been asking for you. Mr. Garrett said there was an important meeting. I was managing the tenant situation. Mrs. Hallowell blinked. I beg your pardon? The family's considering leaving. I visited them this morning. You went to the farms? Alone? I went to talk to people being offered a better deal elsewhere and remind them why staying might actually be the better choice. Elara began removing her muddy cloak. Did Adrian have his meeting? He did, with all 3 families. He offered improved lease terms and financial incentives to stay. And 2 accepted. 1, the Walshes, said they needed to discuss it with their wives. Mrs. Hallowell's expression was strange. Mrs. Walsh apparently told the Duke she'd already spoken with the Duchess this morning and needed to consider both offers together. Elara smiled. Smart woman. Your Grace, you can't just... The Duke doesn't know you did this. He'll be furious. He'll be furious I solved the problem he was trying to solve. Let him be. She paused. Actually, where is he now? His study. He asked to see you the moment you returned. Then I suppose I'd better not keep him waiting. She found Adrian at his desk, jaw tight with barely controlled frustration. You went to the farms, he said without preamble, without telling me, without coordinating with Garrett, without any authorization. I went to talk to people. I didn't realize I needed authorization to have conversations. Those weren't just conversations. You made promises. A teacher, infrastructure improvements, commitments that require significant resources and planning. Commitments I'm prepared to follow through on. Are you saying you won't support them? I'm saying you should have consulted me before making unilateral decisions that affect estate finances. The way you consulted me before offering improved lease terms and financial incentives, she kept her voice level. We agreed to partnership, Adrian. That means we both get to take initiative. Or does partnership only count when you're the one making the decisions? He stood abruptly. That's not fair, isn't it? Because from where I'm standing, you're angry I stepped outside my designated role. Heaven forbid the Duchess concern herself with anything beyond linens and dinner menus. That's not what this is about. Then what is it about? Because I'm fairly certain it's about control. About you being comfortable only when you're managing every variable, including me. I'm trying to protect you. From what? From being effective? From actually using the authority you supposedly gave me? She moved closer. I spent 3 months building trust with the household staff. Those same principles apply to tenant farmers. You offered them money. I offered them connection, community, a reason to invest in Thornfell beyond just profit. And what happens when you can't deliver on those promises? I'll deliver, but I need you to stop undermining me by treating my initiatives like they're reckless impulses that need your approval. She held his gaze. You can't have it both ways, Adrian. You can't ask me to be your partner and then punish me for acting like one. He was silent for a long moment. Then, quietly, You're right. The admission shocked her. What? You're right. I am trying to control this. Control you. Not because I think you're incompetent, but because... He trailed off. Because losing control terrifies me. Because the last time I trusted someone to act independently, they betrayed me. Because it's easier to manage everything myself than risk someone else making decisions that could hurt me. I'm not Caroline. I know. Intellectually, I know that. But knowing and feeling are different things. He ran a hand through his hair. You're asking me to trust you completely, to let go of control. And I don't know if I can. Then learn. Because I'm done being treated like a useful tool you can pick up and set down when convenient. I'm your wife, Adrian. Not your employee, not your asset. Your wife. And if you can't trust me to act in Thornfell's best interests without your constant supervision, then we have a much bigger problem than Lucian's sabotage. Elara, no. You listen to me now. I have spent 3 months proving myself. Proving I'm competent, trustworthy, committed to this estate and this marriage. And you still can't let go of your fear long enough to actually see me as an equal. So here's what's going to happen. She straightened her shoulders. I'm going to follow through on the commitments I made this morning. I'm going to find a teacher for those families. I'm going to work with Garrett on infrastructure improvements. And you're going to support those initiatives or explain to the entire estate why you're sabotaging your own wife's credibility. That's an ultimatum. That's reality. Choose, Adrian. Choose partnership or choose control. But you can't have both. She left before he could respond. Because if she stayed, she'd either start crying or start throwing things, and neither would help. That evening, she skipped dinner entirely. Mary brought a tray to her room, took one look at Elara's face, and wisely said nothing. Around 10, there was a knock on her door. Adrian. May I come in? She almost said no. But they'd agreed on honesty, and hiding wasn't honest. Yes. He entered, looking exhausted, defeated, almost. I spoke with the Walshes this afternoon, he said. They're staying. Mrs. Walsh said your visit meant more to them than any financial incentive I could offer. Good. The Carvers and Hendersons are staying as well. All 3 families cited your promises as the deciding factor. He paused. You were right, about connection mattering more than money. I know. And I was wrong. About everything, really. About trying to control you. About not trusting you. About treating our partnership like it only counts when I'm the one leading. Elara waited. There had to be more. I don't know how to do this, Adrian continued. How to share power without feeling like I'm losing it. How to trust someone completely when my last attempt at trust destroyed me. How to be the husband you deserve instead of the broken thing Caroline left behind. I'm not asking you to be perfect, Adrian. I'm asking you to try. To actually try, not just go through the motions when it's convenient. I'm trying. Are you? Because every time we get close to something real, you find an excuse to retreat. Last night, we finally broke through. We kissed, we connected. It felt like we might actually become something more than polite strangers. And the moment Garrett interrupted, you ran. You chose crisis management over vulnerability. You chose safety over us. I know you didn't mean to. That's what makes it worse. It's instinct for you now. Run from feeling, hide behind duty. Keep everyone at arm's length so they can't hurt you. She stood to face him properly. But I can't keep fighting for both of us, Adrian. I can't want this marriage enough for two people. At some point, you have to decide if what we could have is worth the risk of being hurt again. It is. You are. The words came out desperate. I just don't know how to show you that in ways that matter. Then start small. Stop second-guessing my decisions. Stop treating my initiatives like they need your approval before they're legitimate. Stop running every time we get close to something that feels dangerous. What if I fail? Then you fail. And we deal with it together instead of you failing alone because you were too afraid to try. She moved closer to him. Adrian, I'm not going to betray you. I'm not going to leave. I'm not Caroline, but you have to actually let me in enough to prove that. And you can't do that while keeping me at a distance. He looked at her like she was something precious and terrifying. Then, slowly, he reached out and took her hand. I want to let you in, he said quietly. I want this to work. I want us, however imperfect that looks. Then prove it. How? Support my initiatives publicly. Tomorrow, at breakfast, tell Garrett we're moving forward with the teacher and infrastructure improvements. Let everyone see that we're actually partners, not you tolerating my hobbies. Done. What else? Stop sleeping in your study. Sleep in your actual chambers, the ones next to mine. His eyes widened. Elara, I'm not asking you to sleep with me. I'm asking you to stop physically avoiding proximity. We're married. We share a corridor. It's ridiculous that you avoid your own rooms to keep distance from me. All right, I can do that. And third, she hesitated. This was the risky one. Tell me the whole story. About Caroline, about what happened after you found them, about why you're so convinced you can't trust anyone. Adrian went pale. That's asking a lot. I know, but I can't fight ghosts I don't understand. And Caroline is still between us, Adrian, her and the damage she caused. Until you actually talk about it, she's always going to have power over you. I don't know if I can. Try. For me. For us. He was silent for so long she thought he'd refuse. Then, haltingly, he began to speak. When I found them, I thought I'd die from it. From the pain. It was physical, not just emotional. Like something vital had been ripped out, and I was expected to just keep functioning around the hole. His voice was barely above a whisper. I didn't rage. I didn't yell. I just stood there and felt myself break into pieces too small to ever put back together. Elara squeezed his hand. He held on like she was the only thing keeping him upright. Caroline tried to apologize, said she never meant to hurt me, that it had just happened. Like betrayal was something that happens accidentally, like tripping over furniture. He laughed, bitter. Lucien was worse. He said I should thank him, that he was doing me a favor by showing me what Caroline really was before I trapped myself in marriage to someone who didn't love me. That's monstrous. It's also what I started to believe, that maybe he was right, that maybe I was so fundamentally unlovable that Caroline had no choice but to look elsewhere, that my coldness, my distance, my focus on duty over emotion had driven her away. He met Elara's eyes. What if he was right? What if I'm incapable of giving someone what they need? What if I do the same thing to you that I did to her? You won't. You can't know that. Yes, I can. Because I know the difference between someone who's cold by nature and someone who's cold by necessity. You're not emotionally unavailable because you don't feel things, Adrian. You're emotionally unavailable because feeling things almost destroyed you, so you learned to stop. She moved closer. But I see through it. I see how much you care about this estate, these people, the responsibilities you carry. You're not broken beyond repair. You're just scared. And I understand scared. You're not scared of anything. I'm terrified every single day. Terrified I'm not enough, that I'll fail at this, that you'll never actually see me as more than a convenient replacement for the woman who hurt you, that I'm fighting for something that can never actually exist. Her voice cracked. But I fight anyway. Because the possibility of us, real us, not this careful dance we've been doing, is worth the fear. Adrian pulled her close. Not kissing, just holding her like she might disappear if he let go. I'm sorry, he said into her hair, for all of it. For not seeing you properly. For treating you like a solution instead of a person. For being so damaged that basic trust feels impossible. Stop apologizing and start changing. I will. I am. Starting tomorrow. He pulled back enough to look at her. The teacher, the infrastructure, everything you promised. We'll make it happen. Together, as actual partners. As actual partners, she agreed. They stood like that for a while, just holding each other in the quiet. It wasn't passion, it wasn't even romance, really, but it was real, honest. The foundation of something that might eventually grow into more. Eventually, Adrian pulled away. I should let you rest. It's late. Adrian. She caught his hand before he could leave. One more thing. Yes? Kiss me. Not because you're desperate or proving a point or afraid I'll leave, just because you want to. He studied her face, then slowly he smiled. Actually smiled. Not the controlled social expression he used for appearances, but something genuine. I do want to, he said softly, and kissed her. It was different from the desperate kiss in his study. Slower, deliberate, like he was memorizing the feel of her, the taste of her, committing this moment to memory. When they broke apart, they were both breathing hard. Good night, Elara. Good night. He left, and Elara stood in her room feeling like maybe, finally, they were actually starting to build something worth fighting for. The next morning at breakfast, Adrian made good on his word. Garrett, I need you to allocate funds for a new initiative, he said in front of the full household staff. The Duchess has identified a need for educational resources among our tenant families. We're hiring a traveling teacher. Additionally, we'll be moving forward with infrastructure improvements on the southern farms, roads and water access primarily. Garrett blinked, clearly surprised. That's quite a significant commitment, Your Grace. It's a necessary investment. The Duchess has convinced me that maintaining good tenant relationships requires more than fair rent. It requires demonstrating that we value them as people, not just income sources. He looked at Elara. She was right, as usual. I'll draw up the budgets immediately, Garrett said, still looking stunned. Mrs. Hallowell was smiling broadly. About time someone around here started thinking long-term. Word spread through the estate by noon. The Duke and Duchess, working together, making real changes, actually caring about the people who kept Thornfell running. Elara spent the afternoon interviewing potential teachers. By evening, she'd found someone perfect. A young woman named Miss Sarah Bennett, who'd been teaching at a school that closed due to funding. Smart, passionate, and thrilled at the opportunity to work with farming families. I can start in 2 weeks, Miss Bennett said eagerly. I'll need to arrange lodging. We'll provide a cottage on the estate, Elara said. Small, but comfortable, and a competitive salary, naturally. Your Grace, Thank you. This is more than I'd hoped for. Thank Thornfell's tenant families. They're the ones who deserve someone dedicated to their children's education. She hired Miss Bennett on the spot. That evening, Adrian actually came to dinner. In the formal dining room, sat across from her and talked about their day like they were actually married. Miss Bennett seems capable, he said. She's excellent. The families will love her. You did well, finding her so quickly. I had help. Mrs. Hallowell has a network of contacts that's honestly impressive. She does. I should utilize it more often. They talked through the meal. Nothing profound, just ordinary conversation between two people learning how to be comfortable with each other. Afterward, they walked the gardens together. The late summer air was warm, the roses blooming in profusion thanks to Elara's careful tending. I used to walk here with my mother, Adrian said quietly, before she died. She loved the roses. I can see why. They're beautiful. She would have liked you, my mother. She always said I needed someone who wouldn't tolerate my tendency toward isolation. He paused. She was right. She sounds wise. She was, and stubborn, and fierce when it mattered. He looked at Elara. You remind me of her sometimes, the way you fight for what you believe in. Is that a compliment? It's the highest praise I know how to give. They walked in comfortable silence for a while. Then Adrian spoke again. Lucian won't stop, you know. He'll find other ways to attack. I know. Are you prepared for that? For this to get worse before it gets better? Are you? I asked first. Elara smiled. Yes, I'm prepared. Because we're not fighting alone anymore. We have the staff's loyalty, the tenants' trust, each other. Lucian can scheme all he wants, but he's working from outside while we're building from within. When did you get so strategic? I've always been strategic. You just weren't paying attention. He laughed, actually laughed. The sound startled both of them. I really don't deserve you, Adrian said. Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway. Lucky me. They stopped at a bench overlooking the fountain. The water caught the last of the sunset, turning gold and pink. Elara, Adrian's voice was serious now. I meant what I said last night. About trying. About wanting this to work. I know. I'm going to fail sometimes. Retreat into old patterns. Hurt you without meaning to. I know that too. But I won't stop trying, even when it's hard, even when it terrifies me. He took her hand. You have my word on that. Then we'll be fine. Not perfect, but fine. Fine sounds good. They sat watching the fountain until the sun set completely and the first stars appeared. For the first time since their wedding, Elara felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. A week later, the first concrete evidence of their success arrived. The Walshes sent a note thanking the Duchess for her visit and informing her that their eldest son had already begun lessons with Miss Bennet. The boy was a natural scholar, apparently, had dreams of university someday. We wouldn't have known without her, Margaret Walsh wrote, without you giving us reason to stay. Thank you for seeing us as more than just tenants. Elara showed the letter to Adrian. He read it twice, then set it down carefully. You're changing this place, he said quietly. Making it better. Making me better. We're changing it together. No, this is you, your vision, your heart. He looked at her. I'm just trying to keep up. Then keep up better. I have plans. I don't doubt it. He pulled her close. Tell me these plans. So she did. Over dinner, into the evening, they talked about Thornfell's future. Not just surviving, but thriving. Not just maintaining, but improving. Building something that would last beyond them. And for the first time, Adrian didn't just listen. He contributed, added ideas, challenged her assumptions in ways that made the plan stronger rather than undermining them. It felt like partnership. It felt like possibility. It felt like the marriage they'd both claimed they didn't want but were building anyway, one careful conversation at a time. That night, Adrian walked her to her chambers, paused at the door. I meant to ask, my rooms, the ones next to yours, I've been sleeping there this week, like you asked. But I haven't, that is, I wanted to make sure you knew. I know, I hear you sometimes, moving around. Does it bother you? I can go back to, it doesn't bother me. She touched his face gently. It makes me feel less alone. Me too. He kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. Good night, Elara. Good night. She watched him disappear into his rooms, heard him moving around on the other side of the wall, and smiled. They were getting there. Slowly, imperfectly, with setbacks and stumbles and moments of fear. But they were getting there. And when Lucien's next attack came, because it would come, they'd face it together. As partners. As equals. As something that was starting to feel dangerously close to love, even if neither of them was ready to say it yet. As something that was starting to feel dangerously close to love, even if neither of them was ready to say it yet. Lucien's next attack came exactly 2 weeks later, and it was vicious. A formal complaint filed with the regional magistrate alleging financial mismanagement and improper use of estate funds, signed by 3 concerned citizens. Names Elara didn't recognize, but Garrett identified immediately as Lucian's associates, men who owed him money or favors, or both. It's nonsense, Garrett said, his face tight with anger as he briefed them in Adrian's study. Every expenditure you've made has been documented and approved, but the complaint triggers a mandatory audit. They'll send an inspector within the month. Let them, Elara said. Our books are clean. It's not about the books, Your Grace. It's about the spectacle, The implication of wrongdoing. Even if we're cleared completely, the damage to your reputation will be done. Garrett looked apologetic. People love scandal. They'll remember the accusation long after they forget the vindication. Adrian was quiet, staring at the formal complaint like it might catch fire. He's trying to destroy you, he said finally, looking at Elara. Through me, through Thornfell. But the real target is you. I know. Why? What does he gain from ruining you specifically? Revenge by proxy. He can't hurt you directly anymore. You've cut him off, made it clear he has no power here. So he hurts the person you're allowing close. She met Adrian's eyes. He wants to prove I'm untrustworthy, that giving me authority was a mistake, that you should never have married me. He wants me isolated again. Exactly. Alone and miserable the way he thinks you deserve to be. Adrian stood abruptly. Then we make him regret it. How? By doing exactly what you said weeks ago. We don't just defend against his attacks. We go on offense. Show everyone exactly what kind of man Lucian Thornfell really is. Garrett looked nervous. Your Grace, that could backfire spectacularly. If we make accusations we can't prove. Who said anything about accusations we can't prove? Adrian's expression was sharp, calculating. For the first time since Elara had met him, he looked dangerous. Lucien has been sloppy, arrogant. He thinks I'm still the broken man he left behind 6 years ago. But I'm not. And more importantly, I have something he doesn't. What's that? Elara asked. You, and the network of loyalty you've built. He turned to Garrett. How many of the servants used to work for Lucian's household before he married Caroline? Garrett blinked. 3, I think. Maybe 4. He dismissed most of his staff after the wedding to take on Caroline's people. Find them. Discreetly. Ask if they'd be willing to talk about their time in his employment, especially anything regarding his business practices or personal conduct. Sir, that's information gathering, perfectly legal. Adrian's voice was steel. Lucian wants to play dirty? Fine. But he's playing in my territory now, and I have resources he can't match. Over the next week, Elara watched Adrian transform. Not back into the cold, distant man she'd married, but into something sharper. Focused. He still showed up for meals, still talked with her about estate business, still slept in the rooms next to hers, but there was an edge to him now, a controlled fury that had been absent before. He wasn't just defending Thornfell, he was hunting. Garrett's inquiries yielded results. 2 former servants willing to testify that Lucien had regularly skimmed from household accounts, pocketing money meant for repairs and supplies. Another who'd been dismissed without pay after questioning his management. Nothing criminal. Lucien was too smart for that. But plenty that painted him as untrustworthy and cruel. It's not enough, Adrian said, reviewing the statements. It damages his character, but doesn't counter his attack directly. Then we need to find the connection, Elara said, between his current complaints and his past behavior. Show that this isn't legitimate concern. It's a pattern of harassment. How do we prove pattern? Elara thought for a moment. Then, the dinner party. When he brought Caroline. That wasn't spontaneous. He planned it. Knew exactly what it would do to you. And the tenant poaching also planned, coordinated. This complaint makes 3 deliberate attacks in as many months. Still not proof of malicious intent. He could claim he's legitimately worried about estate management. Unless we can show he's been planning this longer than he claims. She turned to Garrett. The complaint mentioned specific expenditures, things that weren't public knowledge. How would Lucian know the exact amounts we spent on the servants' quarters repairs unless someone was feeding him information? Garrett went pale. You think we have a spy? I think Lucian is too well informed to be guessing. And I think we need to find out who's talking. It took 3 days of careful observation and strategic conversations, but Mary found the leak. One of the newer footmen, hired 6 months before Elara arrived, had been sending regular reports to Lucien's household. Nothing dramatic, just household gossip and snippets of financial information he'd overheard. He didn't think he was doing anything wrong, Mary said, reporting to Elara privately. Said Mr. Lucian paid him for information about the Duke's well-being, claimed it was family concern. But he was being paid? £10 a month, more than his salary here. Elara brought the information to Adrian. We have him, she said. Documented payments from Lucien to a Thornfell servant for information gathering. That's not family concern. That's espionage. Can we prove it? Mary has the footman's confession and bank records showing the deposits. All we need is to connect those payments to Lucien directly. Adrian smiled grimly. That I can do. Lucien uses the same bank I do, and the bank manager owes me several significant favors. The bank records arrived within 2 days. Clear documentation of monthly payments from Lucien's personal account to the footman dating back 8 months. Long before the complaint, long before the dinner party. Lucien had been gathering information, building ammunition, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. We take this to the magistrate, Adrian said. Show that his complaint isn't legitimate concern. It's the culmination of a sustained campaign of harassment using illegally obtained information. Will that be enough to dismiss the audit? It should be, but more importantly, it destroys Lucien's credibility. Makes any future attacks look like obsessive vendetta rather than righteous concern. They prepared their counterfiling meticulously. Not just the bank records and confession, but statements from the former servants about Lucien's character. Letters from the tenant families praising Elara's management and confirming that Lucien had indeed tried to poach them with false promises. A complete financial accounting showing that every penny spent had been justified and documented. It was devastating, comprehensive, irrefutable. This will ruin him, Garrett said, reviewing the final document. Socially, if not legally, no one will trust him after this becomes public. Good, Adrian said flatly. He's earned it. But Elara hesitated. Are we sure we want to do this? Complete destruction? Both men looked at her. He tried to destroy you, Adrian said. He's tried to destroy us. Why are you hesitating? Because complete destruction makes him desperate, and desperate people do dangerous things. She met Adrian's eyes. I want him stopped, not martyred. If we humiliate him publicly, he becomes a victim in some people's eyes. But if we give him a way out, a chance to retreat with some dignity, he might actually take it. You want to offer him terms? I want to win without creating an enemy who'll spend the rest of his life plotting revenge. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. What did you have in mind? They requested a private meeting with Lucien. Neutral ground, the magistrate's office, with the magistrate himself present as witness. Lucien arrived looking confident, smug even, clearly expecting to defend his complaint and watch them squirm. His expression changed when Adrian laid out the counter-evidence. You can't. Lucien's voice faltered as he read through the documents. This is entrapment, illegal search. It's bank records obtained through proper channels and voluntary testimony from multiple witnesses, Adrian said calmly. All admissible, all damning. The magistrate, an older man named Lord Pemberton, who'd known the Thornfell family for decades, looked grave. This is quite serious, Mr. Lucien. Paying servants to spy, using illegally obtained information to file false complaints, attempting to sabotage legitimate business operations. These aren't minor infractions. I was protecting family interests. You were conducting a personal vendetta, Lord Pemberton cut him off. The Duke would be well within his rights to press charges. Fraud, defamation, conspiracy. The list is extensive. Lucien's face drained of color. Adrian, cousin, surely we can, Elara interjected. If you agree to our terms. Lucien's eyes snapped to her. What terms? You withdraw the complaint immediately. You issue a public statement admitting you were mistaken about the financial mismanagement and apologizing for the inconvenience. You cease all contact with Thornfell staff, tenants, and associates. And you stay away from our estate permanently. That's social suicide. That's mercy, Adrian said quietly. The alternative is we file countercharges and release all of this publicly. Every sordid detail, the spying, the manipulation, the pattern of harassment. Your reputation won't just be damaged, it'll be obliterated. You can't do this. We already have. The question is whether we make it public or keep it contained. Adrian leaned forward. Here's what you don't understand, Lucien. I don't want revenge. I don't even want justice particularly. I just want you out of my life, out of our lives, permanently. Take the deal. Disappear. Start over somewhere else where your name isn't attached to mine. Lucien looked between them, at the evidence, at the magistrate's stern expression, at the door that represented his last chance to leave with anything resembling dignity. If I agree, this all stays private? Completely, Elara confirmed. No one needs to know why you're withdrawing the complaint. You can claim you were satisfied by our accounting. Save face, move on. And if I refuse? Then we destroy you, Adrian said simply. Thoroughly, publicly, without hesitation. The silence stretched. Finally, Lucien nodded. I'll withdraw the complaint. In writing, today. Fine. In writing, today. He stood abruptly. You think you've won. You think your little partnership makes you strong. But all I see is my cousin letting some opportunistic woman manipulate him into… Careful. Adrian's voice was ice. You're still here on our mercy. Don't test it. Lucien's jaw worked. Then he turned and left without another word. Lord Pemberton watched him go, then looked at Adrian and Elara. That was well done. Both of you. Firm but fair. He'll honor the agreement. He's not stupid enough to cross me directly. The magistrate smiled slightly. Though I'll admit, I was hoping you'd let me charge him. The man's been a nuisance for years. We considered it, Elara said. But sometimes the best victory is the one that doesn't require ongoing warfare. Wise beyond your years, Your Grace? Lord Pemberton gathered the documents. I'll file these under seal. If he breaks the agreement, we'll have everything we need to act immediately. Until then, consider the matter closed. They left the magistrate's office together. Outside, the afternoon sun was bright and warm, the street busy with ordinary people conducting ordinary business. Adrian took Elara's hand. That was your plan from the beginning, he said. Offer him an out. Make him choose retreat over destruction. It was the smart play. It was the compassionate play. I would have buried him. I know, but I've learned that the best victories are the ones where everyone walks away capable of living with the outcome. She squeezed his hand. You don't need Lucien destroyed to prove you're not the broken man he thinks you are. You just need him gone. And now he is. Now he is. They walked in silence for a while, just enjoying the normalcy of it. No crisis. No attack. No emergency requiring immediate attention. Just a married couple walking through town together. People are staring, Adrian said eventually. Let them. We're interesting. We're scandalous, the Duke and Duchess, holding hands in public like common newlyweds. We are newlyweds, technically. We're 6 months married. That's well past newlywed territory. Then we're rebels, breaking social conventions. How terrible. He laughed, actually laughed, drawing more stares from passers-by. You're making me soft, he said. You're making yourself human. There's a difference. They returned to Thornfell as the sun was setting. The manor looked golden in the late light, beautiful and imposing, and for the first time since Elara had arrived, like home. Mrs. Hallowell met them at the door, beaming. How did it go? It's over, Elara said. Lucien withdrew the complaint. We won't be hearing from him again. The housekeeper's expression transformed into pure joy. I knew it. I knew you two would handle him. She lowered her voice conspiratorially. The whole staff has been on edge. They'll be thrilled. Tell them, Adrian said. Tell everyone. The Duchess and I handled the situation, and Thornfell is secure. I will, Your Grace. Immediately. She paused. And, sir, if I may say so, you seem different, both of you, stronger together. We are, Adrian said simply. Thanks in large part to people like you who've supported us. Mrs. Hallowell looked like she might cry. It's an honor, sir. Truly. That evening, they had dinner in the small dining room, just the two of them. No formality, no pressure. I've been thinking, Adrian said halfway through the meal. Dangerous hobby. He smiled. I've been thinking about what comes next. Now that Lucien's dealt with, now that we've proven we can work together. What do we actually want from this? From the marriage? From everything. The estate, our partnership, the future. He set down his fork. I know what I'm supposed to want. Heirs, stability, smooth operations. But I'm asking what you want. Specifically you, not the Duchess role you've been performing. Elara considered the question, really considered it. I want Thornfell to be more than just functional. I want it to be thriving. I want the people here, staff, tenants, everyone, to feel valued. I want to build something that lasts beyond us. She paused. And I want this marriage to be real. Not just a partnership of convenience, but something that actually matters. To both of us. It already matters to me. Does it? Because sometimes I still feel like you're waiting for me to disappoint you, to prove I'm Caroline after all. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood and moved to her side of the table, knelt beside her chair. Elara, his voice was serious, vulnerable. I need you to understand something. You are nothing like Caroline, not in temperament, not in character, not in any way that matters. And I'm sorry I made you feel like I was comparing you to her. Adrian, no, let me finish. I was comparing you to her. Not consciously, maybe, but I was waiting for betrayal, testing you, looking for cracks. And that was unfair and cruel and completely wrong. He took her hands. You've proven yourself 100 times over. You've been patient with my damage, strategic in your approach to everything, loyal when I didn't deserve it. And I've repaid that by holding back, by not giving you the full partnership you've earned. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm done holding back. I'm done waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'm done treating this marriage like a business arrangement when it stopped being that months ago. He met her eyes. I'm saying I love you, and I should have said it weeks ago, but I was too much of a coward to risk it. Elara's breath caught. You love me? Completely. Inconveniently. In ways that terrify me because I know what it's like to lose someone I love. But I love you anyway, and I want you to know that. Not because you've proven yourself worthy, you did that months ago, but because it's the truth, and we promised each other honesty. She pulled him up and kissed him, hard, desperate, months of tension and fear and carefully controlled want finally breaking free. I love you too, she said when they broke apart. I have for weeks, maybe months. I just didn't think you'd ever be ready to hear it. I'm ready. I'm terrified, but I'm ready. Good, because I'm not going anywhere. Promise? Promise. He kissed her again, and this time, when he pulled away, he looked at her with something like wonder. Come with me, he said. Where? My rooms. Our rooms, if you'll have them. Elara understood what he was offering, what he was asking. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. She stood, took his hand, and let him lead her through the manor, past portraits of stern ancestors who'd probably never felt what they were feeling, past the library where they'd had so many careful conversations, past her rooms which she'd occupied alone for 6 months, to his chambers. Larger than hers, more masculine but warm in the firelight. Adrian pulled her close. We don't have to. If you're not ready. I'm ready, she said. For all of it. For you. For us. What followed was tender and awkward and imperfect and absolutely right. They fumbled with buttons and laughed at the awkwardness and whispered things in the darkness that neither of them would remember clearly later, but both would feel forever. And when it was over, they lay tangled together in Adrian's bed, their bed now, and talked until dawn. About everything. About nothing. About the future they were building together. About how love, when you least expected it, could heal wounds you thought were permanent. Elara woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and Adrian's arm around her waist. For a moment, she just existed in that space, warm and safe and exactly where she belonged. You're awake, Adrian murmured against her hair. So are you. I've been awake for an hour, watching you sleep. That's creepy. That's love. She turned to face him. Say it again. I love you. Again. I love you, Elara Thornfell. My wife. My partner. The woman who saved me from myself. I didn't save you. You saved yourself. I just gave you a reason to try. Then we saved each other. Deal. They stayed in bed until Mrs. Hallowell knocked on the door with breakfast, then hastily dressed and tried to look like they hadn't just spent the night thoroughly consummating their marriage. The housekeeper took one look at them and smiled knowingly. About time, she muttered, setting down the tray. I was beginning to worry you'd never figure it out. Figure what out? Adrian asked, trying for dignity. That you're madly in love with each other and have been for months. The whole staff has been taking bets on when you'd finally admit it. Elara laughed. Who won? Mary, actually. She said it would happen the week after we dealt with Mr. Lucian. Said you both needed the crisis resolved before you could focus on each other properly. Smart girl, Adrian said. Very smart. I'm giving her a raise. Over the next few months, Thornfell transformed. Miss Bennett's teaching program expanded to include evening classes for adults who'd never learned to read. The infrastructure improvements were completed on schedule. 3 more families signed long-term leases, attracted by word of Thornfell's improving conditions and progressive management. Adrian and Elara worked together seamlessly now. He handled the financial and legal aspects. She managed the people and relationships, and together they made decisions that neither could have reached alone. The estate prospered, but more importantly, it felt alive again. People laughed. Children played in the gardens Elara had restored. The manor, which had been so cold and empty when she'd arrived, was full of warmth and life. 1 year after their wedding, Adrian found Elara in the library. "I have something for you," he said. "Oh?" He handed her a small box. Inside was a ring, delicate gold with a single emerald. "It was my grandmother's," he said. "I was going to give it to Caroline, but I never did. Something stopped me. And I'm glad because it belongs to you, if you'll wear it." Elara slipped it on beside her wedding ring. It fit perfectly. "It's beautiful. You're beautiful. And terrifying. And the best thing that's ever happened to me." He pulled her close. "Thank you for not giving up on us. On me. Thank you for finally letting me in." They kissed in the library where so many of their careful conversations had happened, where they'd circled each other like wary opponents before becoming partners, before becoming lovers, before becoming this. "I have something to tell you," Elara said when they broke apart. "What?" "I'm pregnant." Adrian went absolutely still. We're having a baby. In about 6 months, if the doctor's calculations are correct." For a moment she worried he'd panic, worry about repeating his parents' mistakes or passing on his damage. Then he smiled. Not the controlled social smile. The real one. The one that transformed his entire face. "We're having a baby," he repeated, wonder in his voice. "An heir." "A child," Elara corrected. "Not an heir or a spare or a duty. A child. Our child." "Our child," he agreed. "Who will grow up in a house full of love instead of obligation? Who will know their parents are partners? Who will see what a real marriage looks like? No pressure. All the pressure. But we'll manage." Kissed her forehead. "We always do." 6 months later, on a cold February morning, Elara gave birth to a daughter. They named her Eleanor after Adrian's mother. She had Elara's blonde hair and Adrian's dark eyes, and a temperament that suggested she'd inherited stubbornness from both parents. Adrian held her with shaking hands and looked at Elara with tears streaming down his face. "Thank you," he said, "for everything. For her. For us. For saving my life." "We saved each other," Elara reminded him. "Remember?" "I remember." Eleanor grew up in a house full of warmth. She learned to read from Miss Bennet and ride from the stable masters, and charm from watching her mother work with everyone from servants to nobility. She saw her parents disagree and compromise and work together. She saw what partnership actually looked like. And when she was old enough to understand, Elara told her the story. Not a fairy tale about love at first sight, but the truth. About a marriage that started as a transaction and became something real through work and honesty and choosing each other every single day. "So you didn't love Father when you married him?" Eleanor asked, maybe 10 years old and already far too perceptive. "No, I didn't even like him very much. But you love him now. More than anything, except possibly you. What changed?" Elara thought about how to answer. How to explain that love wasn't something that happened to you. It was something you built, deliberately, with effort and patience and the willingness to be vulnerable. "We changed," she said finally. "We chose to change, together. And that made all the difference." Years later, when Eleanor herself married, to a man she actually loved from the start, thank heavens, Elara and Adrian stood together watching their daughter make her vows. "We did well," Adrian said quietly. "We did. She's nothing like us. She's exactly like us, just with a better starting point." He took her hand. After 25 years of marriage, the gesture was automatic, natural, as essential as breathing. "I love you," he said. Not for the first time, not for the 1,000th time, but meaning it just as much as he had that first time in his study when he'd finally been brave enough to say it. "I love you too," They watched their daughter marry her love, watched the estate they'd built together continue to thrive, watched the life they'd created from nothing but determination and stubbornness and a refusal to accept that broken things couldn't be mended. And Elara thought about the woman she'd been on her wedding night, humiliated, angry, alone in a beautiful room with a husband who saw her as an obligation. She would have laughed if someone had told her then that she'd end up here, happy, fulfilled, deeply, permanently in love with the cold stranger who'd broken her heart before she'd even had a chance to give it to him. But that was the thing about love, she'd learned. The real kind, the kind that lasted. It didn't arrive perfectly formed. It arrived messy and difficult and imperfect. And then, if you were brave enough to work for it, it became everything you never knew you needed. "Come on," Adrian said, tugging her toward the reception. "They're about to make the toasts, and you know Eleanor will be furious if we're not there." "Lead the way, Your Grace." "Together, Your Grace. Always together." They walked into the celebration hand in hand, the Duke and Duchess of Thornfell, partners, equals, lovers, friends, everything they'd fought to become, everything they'd chosen, every single day to remain. And in the warmth of family and the joy of watching their daughter begin her own journey, Elara understood that the greatest victory wasn't defeating Lucian or saving the estate or proving herself worthy. The greatest victory was this ordinary, extraordinary life she'd built with a man who'd been too broken to love and a woman who'd been too practical to dream. They'd healed each other, changed each other, saved each other, and they'd turned a marriage of ice into something that burned warm enough to last forever. That was enough. More than enough. That was everything.